Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Krasner. Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Nguyen.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Orentlicker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Chairman Yeager.
Here. We do have a quorum. For the time being, please mark Assemblywoman Krasner absent. If and when she arrives, we'll change that designation. Good morning, committee members, and good morning to everyone watching either on the legislature's website or on YouTube this morning. I want to welcome you to the second week of the Nevada Legislature, and obviously the first Monday of this week, our Assembly Judiciary Committee hearing. I hope everyone had a really great weekend, and we're going to kick off here pretty soon. Before we do that, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. These will become familiar, and mainly they're for members of the committee, but members, if you can remember to mute yourself if you're not speaking, that helps with the audio feedback. And then, of course, for members and for presenters and members of the public, we have to make sure we treat each other with respect and make sure that we're doing justice to this legislative process. So please be courteous and respectful with one another, even if you might not agree on issues or positions. And then finally, for those watching us, as you can see, we are in virtual land, and many of us are working on multiple devices at one time to try to participate in Zoom and also look at the exhibits. So if you see members looking away or looking at other devices, please don't see that as a sign of disrespect or inattention. We're simply trying to manage this new virtual world that we are living in for the time being. So I think that's it for the housekeeping items. Members of the public, as you'll see, we have 4 different presentations on the agenda today, which is why we're starting at 8 o'clock the day after the Super Bowl. So please excuse me for that. Hopefully some better planning in the future. But just so you have a sense of how things are going, we're going to take the presentations a little bit out of order in terms of how they're listed on the agenda. We're going to start with the presentation from the 8th Judicial District Court, and then we're going to move to the 2nd Judicial District Court, followed by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and then finally Sheriffs and Chiefs. So for those of you presenting, I know that you're all on the Zoom already, but if you're not going to be presenting for a while, feel free to just sort of monitor where things are at, and we'll tune in. And then committee members, I've asked our presenters, as always, to keep their presentations relatively short so we have time for any questions from members. So we'll let them get through the presentation. And then, as always, I'll open it up for questions from members of the committee. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and go to our presentation from the 8th Judicial District Court of Nevada. And before I introduce our presenter, I wanted to remind members of the public and members that you can find the presentation itself on Nellis, which is linked on the legislature's website. So you can feel free to follow along there. You can download the presentation for future needs. But at this time, I want to welcome to the committee Chief Judge, the Honorable Linda Bell. Judge Bell, I want to welcome you back to the Assembly Judiciary Committee and both congratulate you and offer my condolences on again being chosen as Chief Judge. I know how much work that can be for you, but thank you so much for joining us here this morning, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. My name is Linda Bell, and I am honored to serve as the Chief Judge of the 8th Judicial District Court. I've been the Chief for about 2.5 years. So COVID's certainly been an opportunity for a lot of learning, and I am going to, I'm running the PowerPoint myself this morning, so please keep your fingers crossed for me while I try to make this work. There we go. All right. So I want to begin by thanking you all for the opportunity to provide an overview of our court. The 8th Judicial District Court is one of the trial courts in the state of Nevada. We are the largest court in the state and a very busy court. And this is just where we fall within the judicial branch. As you can see on this slide, it shows the historical growth of our court over the years and the way the legislature has helped us to meet the growing needs of Clark County with judicial resources. Most recently, thanks to the legislature passing AB 43 last session, the court added 6 new family division departments for a total of 26 judicial departments in our family division, which is an incredibly busy division of our court. And then after this past election, due to retirements and the additional judicial positions, we welcomed an unprecedented 22 new judges to the bench this January, which is about a third of our court. So that's been a very big change for us. We currently have 58 district court judges, 12 hearing masters who serve as judicial officers and assist us to get all of the business of the court done, 695 full and part-time employees. We are the busiest court in the state, and in fact, one of the busiest courts in the country. We had 69,878 new filings in 2020. The high volume of those cases and obviously the fiscal pressure that everybody is facing require us to be really as efficient as we can and innovative to manage all of those cases to serve the community of Clark County. Our jurisdiction comes from the Nevada Constitution, Article 6 and Chapter 3 of the Nevada Revised Statutes. We are a general jurisdiction court. That means we hear civil cases where the amount in controversy is more than $15,000, as well as other specified types of civil cases. We hear felonies and gross misdemeanors in criminal cases. We hear divorce, child welfare, juvenile delinquency, appeals from justice and municipal court, guardianship cases, probate. We have a wide variety of cases. We have 32 judicial departments who serve in our civil and criminal division. Judges Gonzalez, Denton, Williams, and Alf serve as business court judges to preside over business matters, which include cases arising from the Uniform Commercial Code, business torts, and cases arising from the purchase or sale of a business. So we have judges with particular expertise in that area to better serve the business community of Clark County. We also have a dedicated team of judges who preside over cases where a person has been charged with homicide. That team centralizes the management of homicide cases. We were having a really significant backlog, and Justice Herndon created the homicide team to help efficiently and timely dispose of the cases, and also to ensure that we have experienced judges handling the most difficult cases. The judges currently serving on the homicide team are Judges Tiara Jones, Levitt, Villani, and Silva. We have 7 judges added in 2021 who hear exclusively civil cases, who are funded through a special funding source from civil filing fees. We now have 26 judicial departments in our family division. And again, I cannot thank the legislature enough for the passage of AB 43 that added 6 new family division departments, much needed judicial resources for this division. Of the 26 departments, 5 departments are dedicated to juvenile dependency, 2 departments are dedicated to delinquency and dependency, 2 are dedicated to guardianship cases, and the remaining 17 judges handle civil, domestic, or divorce cases. We have several facilities. The Regional Justice Center is the home to most of our civil criminal departments and 7 of our family departments, as we have outgrown our family court campus. A portion of our civil division is located at the Phoenix building across from the RJC, and the remaining family court and juvenile departments are located at a campus on Bonanza and Pecos. Our child support division is housed at the Greystone building. We maintain responsibility for the safety and security of the folks at each of these facilities. Since last March, at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've taken a number of measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 within the court facilities. We've dropped visitor volume at the Regional Justice Center nearly 60% from our 2019 figures, and then at the Family Division, the number of visitors has dropped about 73%, trying to reduce the number of people in the buildings to increase safety for everyone. We are primarily funded through general fund dollars from Clark County. The Nevada Supreme Court in Mountain View versus Imperial Commercial has given a modern day interpretation to NRS 3.100, the funding statute, and determined that the counties have a responsibility to provide adequate courtroom facilities and support staff for the district courts. We have, for efficiencies and cost savings, an interlocal agreement with Clark County, which allows us to use certain county resources and departments for operational support, which benefits Clark County taxpayers, so we're not repeating functions. Our funding is approximately $75,733,240 for fiscal year 20, the majority of which comes from the general fund, as you can see from this slide. The district court special filing fees is a revenue stream that was established by the legislature in 2009 to fund 9 additional judicial departments in Clark County. And we also have a number of specialty courts. That funding has seen a dramatic improvement thanks to legislative allocations of nearly $4 million from the state general fund. And if you can see, for our specialty courts, about a little more than half comes through the AOC funding for a little over $4 million, $4.4 million. We receive about $3.4 million in grants, and then we have client fees in SAPTA funding for a total of $8,300,000 roughly for the specialty courts. This slide shows our funding over the last 5 years. In fiscal year 16, there were no COLA increases, which explains why we were not, the COLA increases were not accounted for, so that explains why we were not as under budget. We try to be fiscally responsible and do the best we can with the resources that we have. As you can see, we have 6,159 pending criminal cases, 33,030 in civil, and 44,753 in family. We continue to make a concerted effort to close completed cases to make sure that we have accurate numbers. This slide shows the number of criminal cases that were filed in 2020. There were 6,680 new cases filed and 10,235 closed. There were only 28 criminal jury trials last year because of COVID. We were not doing jury trials most of the year, and 1 criminal bench trial. To give you some perspective on that, the last time I presented to this committee, there had been 130 criminal jury trials and 11 bench trials. So the pandemic has dramatically slowed the pace of jury trials in our court. And this shows just the trends of criminal case filings. We were slightly down last year, I think also due to coronavirus. And the end of the year pending criminal cases, which has stayed pretty steady. In our civil cases, you can see we've made great improvement in our dispositions. Last year, we had 27 jury trials, 97 bench trials, and then we have 2 diversionary programs that are used in cases valued under $50,000. Our short trial program, which uses a smaller jury, and trials have to be done in 1 day in that program, and they handled 19 trials. To again give you perspective on these statistics, the last legislative session, we had done 83 civil jury trials, 209 bench trials, and 19 short trials. So trials is really the place where we've had a hard time with due to COVID. We have specialized judges to hear complex business and construction defect cases. Medical malpractice cases are also some of the most complex cases handled by our civil judges. We have specialized judges to hear probate, adult and minor guardianship cases, and those judges are from both our civil and family divisions. We've used cross-training among our judicial officers because of the common issues that arise from these types of cases. And we've worked very hard to review our guardianship and probate case types to ensure that older cases are closed out. And we've revised a number of procedures in both areas. This shows our civil filing trends over the years and all of our pending civil cases. Then this chart shows the different types of cases in our civil division with the number of pending cases. So you can see that general civil cases are the vast majority of the cases that we have. Our family division is also very active, and there are a number of different case types seen by the judges in that division. Our civil domestic, the divorced division is the largest, and those there were 16,884 cases filed last year, and we disposed of 19,340. We also have child support cases, temporary protective orders, civil commitments, juvenile dependency, which are abuse and neglect cases, and juvenile delinquency. This slide shows the various trends from the family division and pending domestic cases. And this just shows an overview of the different types of cases and the percentage that they account for within our court. The 8th Judicial District Court operates 12 specialty court programs. The Lima Diversion Program is a new pilot project with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. The court, in terms of judicial officers, are not really involved in that program. We help provide some grant support and a person to assist Metro to provide some intervention services on the front end for people who have mental health and addiction issues. It's a pre-booking diversion program developed to address low-level drug crimes, and it's a minimum of 9 months. It allows the law enforcement officers to redirect low-level drug offenders to engage in community-based services. So by diverting eligible individuals to services, the goal is to increase public safety, reduce the criminal behavior of the people participating in the program. They have a requirement for the program is that the person have a chemical dependency issue and be willing to engage in treatment services. And that's a great example of one of our community partnerships. We've really enjoyed the opportunity to work with other agencies in our community because I think we can always do great things when we work together. Here are our numbers from our specialty court numbers from 2019. This was our co-occurring disorders court first year, so we did not have any graduates yet from that program. And then these are statistics from our specialty courts for 2020. This was also Lima's first year, and so we don't have any graduates of that program either. CASA celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2020. CASA supports and promotes a court-appointed volunteer advocacy for abused and neglected children. Since its inception in 1980, the CASA program has trained and sworn in more than 1,500 CASA volunteers, and they've represented more than 5,800 children. That program began with the help of the late District Court Judge John Mendoza in the Junior League of Las Vegas. The court continues to manage the CASA program. The District Court's CASA program staff received the Nevada Governor's 2020 Bronze Points of Light Ceremony Award in the Business Corporate Volunteer Program category. So the day after Governor Sisolak declared a state of emergency, the district court began transitioning to hear matters through alternative means. COVID's been really the focus of a lot of our energy this past year, as it has everyone else. Parties and their attorneys can appear through video or by phone in court using a Blue Jeans video conferencing platform. The courthouse never completely closed. At the beginning of the pandemic, we focused on essential case types. For that first couple months, we were in phase 1, and we implemented a screening process based on CDC guidelines, advising people not to enter the courthouse if they felt ill or had been exposed to somebody with COVID-19. Everyone entering the court facility is required to wear a face covering, and if they do not have one, we provide them. We've installed plastic window partitions in courtrooms and near entrances to protect court employees and the public. We've established social distancing practices like limiting the number of people to an elevator, placing decals on the floor to space people 6 feet apart where we have places where there are lines, and alleviating the crowding in the RJC by closing the clerk's office to in-person filings and closing traffic windows. We've tried to limit the need for paper documents and visiting the court to drop off or receive court filings by going to a truly paperless format. Through the pandemic, we've had to make adjustments to court operations depending on the health risk facing our community. So we temporarily halted jury trials in March because of concerns for the jurors. And during that time, we sought the advice of the Southern Nevada Health District, UMC, and the State of Nevada's Division of Health and Human Services to develop and implement a comprehensive plan to allow the court to resume in-person jury operations. We worked with our partners at Clark County to reconfigure and rebuild our courtrooms. You can see here the during construction and after construction, to allow for social distancing of the jurors. If you can see in the bottom photo, the jury box takes up the vast majority of the courtroom. And social distancing of the jurors, parties, and their attorneys. We've removed barriers to create more open space, installed plexiglass dividers, and worked to enhance the air quality and air disinfection within the courthouse. Deputy marshals ensure that court staff, jurors, attorneys, and parties answer the CDC-approved COVID-19 screening questions and complete temperature checks daily. And then we provide public access, which is required for open trial proceedings. So we have live streams of the trial on our website through YouTube. We have a rapid testing site that UMC has set up with us in the event that an individual reports COVID-19 symptoms during a trial. And if there is a positive test result, then the trial would be suspended, and then we would work with public health officials on contact tracing and to determine whether it's safe to resume the trial. We did a number of at least we started a number of trials in the fall before the governor started the pause, and we've just restarted trials again recently. And in fact, our first jury trial since restarting is going on today. It started Wednesday and is ongoing. The jury commissioner now summons a reduced number of citizens to field a sufficient amount of jurors for a trial. Jury selection takes place in our jury assembly room now instead of the courtroom because we don't have a courtroom large enough to maintain social distancing for the jurors. Any prospective jurors who are experiencing symptoms or have been exposed are asked not to report and will be rescheduled. And then prospective jurors who are considered high risk or have underlying medical conditions are also eligible for deferral of jury duty. We have a new standard supplemental questionnaire that we obtained some of that information and tried to pre-screen selective prospective jurors for issues related to hardship and COVID-19 to make sure that the jurors can serve safely. With the assistance, as I said in the beginning, COVID has offered us a lot of learning experiences and required us also to be somewhat innovative. With the assistance of our IT department, we've developed an application that allows litigants to email a proposed order to the judicial department. And if it conforms to the judge's decision, the judge can electronically sign and file the order, and then it electronically serves the order to those who have registered for electronic service with the court's filing system. So this has really transformed the way the court conducts business and allows litigants to more quickly receive the court's decision. We do have some security measures in place, like when we do the signature, there's a unique code that's placed on the document so we can tell that that was the document signed by the judge. It also allows us to capture some information that we haven't before. Sometimes it's a little hard as a court for us to show what we're doing when we're not in court. And this app keeps track of all of the numbers of orders we sign. In the second half of 2020, with not all of our departments using this app, we rolled it out quite slowly, and then we had a few people retiring that didn't participate. But even with that, we processed 58,736 orders in the second half of 2020. Along with developing this proposed order app, we introduced a new process to handle search warrants electronically. So law enforcement agencies in Clark County can email warrants to the judge that's on duty, and then they call and they're sworn in. The judge reviews the warrant and then is able to sign it electronically and return it to the officer. We estimate this saves about 2 hours per warrant for the officers, and in 2020 we processed 4,004 electronic search warrants. So that's been another wonderful community partnership for us. We appreciate the cooperation of law enforcement to keep everybody safe and also just to help save some time too. We created a one-stop shop at our family campus by merging the Family Law Self-Help Center and the TPO offices. And when the pandemic hit, then we created an online guided interview for domestic violence TPO applications to help people file their application online with the court. Last year, we completed 2,401 domestic violence TPO interviews online. And that is it. This concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you so much, Judge Bell. Appreciate that. You did a marvelous job of getting through all of those slides. And before I take questions, I did want to commend you on the court's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm on those listservs, and I just remember a series of orders that came out right after COVID-19 hit, and I thought, that what the district court did was a model, I think, for the rest of the state. And obviously, there were some challenges there, but just want to commend you for being flexible and making sure folks in the building were staying safe. I have a couple of questions, but I'd like to go to some of my committee members first. So at the moment, we'll have the order as, let me see here. The order will be Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod, Assemblywoman Nguyen, Assemblywoman Hanson, and Assemblywoman Kasama, and then we'll take additional ones after that. So please go ahead, Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Chair. I actually had two questions. I think one's really easy. So let me start with the first one. And thank you for being here. First of all, Judge Bell, I really appreciate it. And I echo the chair's remarks about you guys doing just a fabulous job. As someone who is new to the committee, if you could explain this to me, because I'm sure I'm just not getting it. Slide 13, 14, and 15. So, and slide 13, it talks about the pending criminal cases, and it was 6,750 in 2019, and then 6,803. And then the totals were 9,776, but then it ended with a pending 6,159. Does that mean, could you?
So when you look at this, the blue is how many new cases were filed. The red is how many cases were closed. So we went back through and closed more cases than were opened. And then the green is how many cases are left at this point.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah. So I'm just wondering the pending case, like, I guess, where are the folks who are still pending? Are they incarcerated? Are they?
It's a wide variety. So this covers all of our criminal cases. We have people who are pretrial on own recognizance release or released with house arrest, released on bail. We have people who are in custody at the Clark County Detention Center, either waiting trial or waiting sentencing. So it encompasses the whole gamut of potential options in a criminal case.
Okay. Thank you. May I ask one real quick question, Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I had heard that at one point you guys were using the convention center. Is that happening, or did that not happen?
That is happening. We obtained some space. The convention center has been wonderful working with us, and we obtained some space, rented some space from them to conduct a very large civil bench trial that needed to go forward. And we still have that space. We're trying to use that space to conduct civil jury trials. As we've set trials there, they have negotiated. We definitely see that cases resolve when trials are available. So it's been very helpful. We do anticipate having some cases go forward this month and next month in that space. So we can do one trial there because we have the ability with that space to socially distance everybody who's participating.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And before we take the next question, I did want to ask, Madam Secretary, could you please mark Assemblywoman Krasner present? I notice she is now on the Zoom. So with that business behind us, let's go next to Vice Chair Wynn.
Good morning, and thank you, Judge Bell, for being present today to answer some of our questions. And not to sound like a broken record, but I would ditto the comments of the previous speakers, including our chair, about the efforts that have been made, at least on behalf of the district court. Has there been any kind of coordinated effort for those members that do not know, like in Southern Nevada, the Regional Justice Center is home to not only the 8th Judicial District Court, but also the Las Vegas Justice Court and the Las Vegas Municipal Court. Obviously, those are 3 jurisdictions, and I know that sometimes there's some fighting within those and between those kingdoms. Has there been any kind of coordinated effort between those 3 jurisdictions to have like a consistent practice, within the building itself? I mean, I know, but I would love for you to inform our members of any kind of coordinated effort there is to be consistent among the 3 jurisdictions that are in that building.
We have consistently reached out to the other courts in the building to discuss coordination, and each court has to make its own decision about how they handle things. We had the ability already to handle cases virtually. We were very fortunate to be able to do that. Other courts did not make the same decision to handle cases virtually. Everything closed down for that phase 1, but then after that, there was some in-person appearances in other courts, and lawyers didn't necessarily have the option to appear virtually, the same option that they did in district court, which is a matter of concern that we continue to discuss with the other occupants of the building.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go next to Assemblywoman Hanson, who I think has a couple of questions.
Hi, good morning. Judge Bell, it's good to see you, and your presentation is a wealth of information. I just wanted one quick question on slide 27, co-occurring disorders court, if you could maybe kind of let us know what that is.
Sure. So we have an adult drug court, and I think by this point people are pretty familiar with drug court. And we have a mental health court. Again, that's one of the more familiar specialty courts. But what we found is there's a place where there's a gap when we have people who are too mentally ill to really participate in the adult drug court, or they struggle participating in the adult drug court, but their substance abuse disorder is more than what we typically see in the mental health court. And so to try to fill that gap, Judge Yeager started a co-occurring court that handles cases where they're kind of in between those two specialty courts, where we're not able to really meet the needs of that population with either of the other one.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And then back to slide 13, a little bit where my colleague, Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod, that was the slide that she had mentioned. So the jury trials, that was where my questions are and lie. If I'm understanding the math right, so the shutdown occurred almost 11 months ago, essentially on and off in March.
Right.
And then you did your protocols, which we greatly appreciate, that the struggle that I'm sure has been. It sounds like maybe 3 months is about all that you've had available to try to do any of these jury trials. Is that math right? You said there was the pause, and now you've got a trial going now. Is that about right?
That is about right. We were up and going for a few months, and then we hit the pause and then stopped again because we wanted to make sure we felt comfortable bringing jurors in. We restarted at the beginning of the month, and we've had trials negotiated. Now we have a case that's going. During that time, we though still have had cases resolve. The most of our cases in our system, and I don't think that we're unique in any way, resolve through guilty plea. And so we have continued to process cases where somebody is pleading guilty. We also have started a criminal settlement conference program over the last couple. We started that well before COVID, but we have continued to do criminal settlement conferences to try to resolve cases that way. But we do have a backlog of criminal jury trials, which is probably somewhere around 300 or 400 cases.
And Chair, if I could follow up.
Please go ahead.
So Judge Bell, so obviously a pretty large backlog compared to a non-pandemic, I would assume. My concern is, so where are those plaintiffs, defendants at this point in the process? I'm assuming some are in jail, some are still waiting, their trials are being extended quite a long time. Just wondering how this compares to a non-pandemic as far as the percentage maybe of those, and also a sub answer to, can you guesstimate how many of those are in jail versus?
So the most recent numbers that I have, we had comparing how many pending cases we had from year to year. We had 1,500 pending jury trials in November of 2019 and about 1,800 pending in November of 2020. So about a 300 or so case difference. The individuals who are facing trial, it's a variety. Some are in, some are out. And I'm sorry, I don't know how I can see if we can try to figure out those numbers, but I don't have those numbers. I don't have those numbers available today. Each judge has to make a decision about what they think is appropriate in terms of whether the person is in or out of custody, looking at community safety and whether the person is a flight risk. And so some of those people are out of custody. Some of the people have remained in custody because of concerns that the judge has about either their ability to show up for court in a trial or the danger to the community should that person be released pre-trial. We have people who are, there's actually 3 categories. So we have people who are out of custody, people who are in custody at the detention center, and then we have some people who are incarcerated in other facilities but waiting trial. So for example, somebody who has another case who's in the Nevada Department of Corrections. So we have, that's the breakdown, but I don't have the specific numbers.
Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying many of my questions. So thanks again.
Let's go next to Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Judge Bell. Again, my heart actually goes out to you. I'm listening to this and all these cases that are kind of backlog. And I'm just wondering how you have thought about getting through those and catching up, so to speak. Hire substitute judges, and so will the days be longer at the courthouse? How will you be able to catch us up? It just seems like a really tough thing to be able to accomplish.
So right now we have the 2 COVID ready courtrooms. That was very expensive and the county was very helpful getting those set up for us so that we do have some place that we can do trials while we're dealing with the social distancing and the ability and making sure we have the ability to keep jurors safe. We then rolled from that to 22 new judges. So we've been working on trying to get the judges up and running. And now we're going to be turning our attention to what that's going to look like in terms of trials as we get to the point where we're not under the pandemic restrictions. So we're going to have a small committee that tries to figure out models where we can make sure that we're trying as many cases as we possibly can to get through this backlog. So it may be that we have people assigned to do just trials. We want to make sure that we can try cases from, first thing in the morning till the end of the day. Typically, that hasn't always happened because judges typically continue to do all of their other work while they're in trial. So trials may not start until 11 or even 1 in the afternoon. And we know that that's not going to work with this backlog. So we are developing a plan for moving forward and making sure that we can try as many cases as quickly as possible, making sure that people still, of course, get the time that they need to try their case. So we're working on it.
Well, it just seems like a challenge, and I'm sure you do have those plans, and I'm wishing you all the best because it just sounds like a real challenge. And
Thank
however,
you. Yes.
longer hours or reassign judges, but
we also, I probably should mention also, we have senior judges and the Supreme Court runs a senior judge program. And so the senior judges have been tremendously helpful. For example, doing criminal settlement conferences. So we've had a tremendous amount of support from the Nevada Supreme Court, from Justice Hardesty now, and last year, Justice Pickering was the Chief Justice, and they've been both phenomenal and supportive of all of our efforts and trying to help us work through things. And then Justice Paragary, who runs the senior judge program, they've all been tremendous in trying to help us work through the issues that we've faced because of the pandemic.
that sounds like a wonderful resource. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your information.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go next to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Good morning, Judge Bell. It's wonderful to see you. I have a question about your case flow management in family court, slide number 25. There is a significant portion of that pie chart that is juvenile delinquency. And then when you add the juvenile dependency statistic, we're almost at half of family court filings. Could you please explain how a juvenile delinquency gets to a court filing, and also how the dependency gets there? Who is initiating these, and whether or not these juveniles are represented by the public defender or some entity to help them manage this?
Sure. So that particular statistic is maybe not a great number, and we're aware of this because we tend to not close delinquency cases because kids come back in and out of the system, and so we're continuing to work on a way to manage that number and get a better number for that. If you look back on slide 22, I think that gives a better, more accurate number. So juvenile delinquency cases, we had 2,644 filings last year. So it's not quite as big as it looks. The juvenile delinquency cases are handled, all of the juveniles who are brought into the system who have committed some sort of offense are brought into the juvenile court. They're all represented by an attorney, whether it's the public defender's office, they hire somebody, or somebody is appointed in case of a conflict. So they all have representation. And then the dependency cases are the child welfare cases, and those come into the system through family services, and the parents in those cases have attorneys as well. And sometimes sometimes there's attorneys appointed for the kids. Sometimes many of the kids have CASAs, or it's not really the kids. The court will sometimes appoint CASAs in cases as well to be there as to kind of the eyes and ears of the court.
Chair, if I may ask a follow-up.
Please go ahead.
So thank you, Judge Bell. When you say a CASA, you mean a court-appointed advocate, and are they there to advocate for the juvenile, or you said that they're the eyes and ears? They're the eyes and ears for whom?
The court, they actually will go and they provide reports to the court about kind of what is happening, so that the court has a better idea of the dynamics of the particular situation. So they may spend time with the child. They don't function as an attorney for the child. Legal aid does now have attorneys for most of the kids in this, if not all. I'm not sure. I know that that's their goal, is for all, but most of the kids who are in the foster care system have an attorney through legal aid. But the CASA serves kind of a different function than that. They're not an attorney for the child, although they typically will spend time with the child, but they'll observe what's going on in that foster family, and then they provide a report to the court as somewhat of a neutral person to give information to the court.
Thank you.
Okay, and we are running up against the clock a little bit because I want to make sure our future presenters have enough time. So I'm going to take one last question from Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Judge Bell, for being here for the presentation. My question is about after COVID, so post-COVID, you're already busting at the seams as far as especially family court, but also at the RJC. So what are the, I won't say long-term, but more medium-term plans? What are you going to do to physically fit everyone?
So municipal court will be moving out sometime during 2021, and that will provide some additional space. There is still space in the RJC on the 17th floor. Right now, the county is creating a complex, is remodeling the old Supreme Court to make a complex litigation courtroom on that floor. We were pre-COVID, we were starting to have conversations about additional court facilities because we are completely out of room, especially in the family court campus. It was built for 6-8 judicial officers, and we have 26. So we are absolutely bursting at the seams. It's a really significant issue to us that got sidetracked a little bit because of COVID, but I anticipate once we get through all of this, then we will continue to have those discussions because we do desperately need to have a long-term facilities plan.
Okay, thank you.
And we're going to leave it at that. Members, I know there were probably other questions out there. I had a couple myself, but let's see. Hopefully everyone can still hear me. I'm having a video issue, but we're going to leave it there. If you have questions for Judge Bell beyond what she was able to answer today, please feel free to reach out to myself, and we can make that happen. But Judge Bell, I want to thank you so much for spending an hour of your Monday morning with us and providing all of this information. And thank you again for all the hard work that you're doing there at the RJC, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to all of you. I really appreciate the support that we've gotten from the legislature, and I am happy if whether through Chair Yeager or if you want to reach out to me individually, I'm very happy to answer any additional questions. Everyone have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, committee, and I'll figure out what's going on with my video, but while I figure that out, I want to go ahead and queue up our next presentation. We have next a presentation from the 2nd Judicial District Court of Nevada, and we have joining us this morning the Honorable Scott Freeman, who I believe is the Chief Judge in the 2nd Judicial District Court. And like our last presentation, there is an exhibit on Nellis that I think Judge Freeman will take us through. So members of the public or committee members, feel free to log on and find that. But Judge Freeman, want to welcome you to the Assembly Judiciary Committee. Thank you for being here, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you very much for having me. I want to first thank Judge Bell for going through her presentation, which I always like to say sometimes Washoe County is Clark County light in terms of the things that she's experiencing. We're experiencing the same thing and dealing with it accordingly. So thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. It's always an honor to meet with our legislative colleagues and to share the happenings of the 2nd Judicial District Court. I've been the Chief Judge since 2018. I had the privilege of presenting, like Judge Bell, to you last legislative session. And I want to thank you again for an additional family court judge, which you allowed when I made those presentations to you last session. I've been the chief for 3 years. This is my 4th and final year as chief. However, for me, I will be transitioning to president of the statewide Nevada District Judges Association, so I will still be hanging around. Nevada has 11 judicial districts making up the state's general jurisdiction court. These district courts serve Nevada's 17 counties. Washoe County is in the 2nd Judicial District, thus the name, the 2nd Judicial District Court. Pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute 1.050, all district courts shall sit at the county seat of the county in which it is held. As Judge Bell indicated, we preside over gross misdemeanor and felony criminal cases and civil cases where the amount in dispute, as you know, exceeds $15,000. And family matters such as divorce, custody, minor guardianships, child support, child abuse and neglect, juvenile delinquency, and children in foster care. When cases are appealed from the district court, they're heard by the Nevada Supreme Court, or they can be heard by the Nevada Court of Appeals at the Supreme Court's discretion. Municipal or justice court cases are appealed to our district courts. The 2nd Judicial District Court has 2 divisions. a general jurisdiction division, which handles all civil and criminal matters, and a family division, which handles the family matters like the 8th Judicial District. Although we have 9 judges in general jurisdiction and now 7 in the family division, again, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity last year to present to you, and you provided to us Department 16 in the 2nd Judicial District Court Family Division. Judge Amy Benalis was sworn into that department on January 4th of this year after running for her department unopposed. Judges are elected for a 6-year term, and judges are elected at the same time. Our current bench members were all elected in November 2020 and took office on January 4th of this year. The family division is physically located at 1 South Sierra on the 1st and 3rd floors in downtown Reno. The general jurisdiction division is located across the street at 75 Court Street in the historic courthouse. In addition to the 16 judges, the 2nd Judicial District Court has 6 judicial officers who are employees rather than elected judicial officers. They have limited scope of authority, and their decisions typically must be countersigned by a district court judge. We have 1 commissioner in the general jurisdiction division who's dedicated to probate matters. We have 4 masters in the family division. Each is responsible for an area of juvenile delinquency, juvenile dependency, child support, and protection orders. We also have 1 commissioner dedicated to discovery issues who receives assignments from judges in both divisions. In addition to 172 full-time employees, the court uses contractors for court reporting, mediation, and interpreters. Judges are paid for by the state of Nevada. However, all court employees, costs of running the court, including the facilities, are funded by Washoe County. As you can see, we have approximately $34.6 million annual budget. Turning to a whole new world, like everyone else, the court's world dramatically changed in March of 2020. Fortunately, we were somewhat prepared for what was to come. We began preparations in January as we watched the coronavirus impact other countries. We picked several employees to start testing remote work to see what worked and what did not. We met with stakeholders to discuss their needs and ours and brainstorm solutions to previously unthought of problems. One of our judges, Judge Connie Steinheimer, the most senior sitting judge in our state, spearheaded testing virtual operations and held court several times virtually. Then on March 17th, I closed the courthouse in response to Governor Sisolak's directive. I indefinitely canceled all jury trials. I moved our criminal calendar to virtual only, and we began virtual operations on March 19th. Moving to remote operations was a court-wide effort. It was only because we had prepared that we were able to pivot so quickly. Years of investing in technology and advancing court operations, as well as partnering with our stakeholders, enabled this to occur. Some have asked if we were able to provide service remotely. The answer is yes. It's not always the easiest approach. It's not the preferred approach, but it has worked. There was a question about meeting with judges of different jurisdictions in Washoe County. We meet every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, where I meet with judges from Reno Municipal Court, the Justice Court in Reno and in Sparks, and we compare and contrast our notes as we move forward to try to work together. Even though they're independent, we try to work together during this COVID time and do meet every Wednesday at 4 o'clock with those judges. Zoom is our virtual platform of choice. We post all proceedings online for live viewing for public for all court hearings. As you can see from this slide, we've attempted to become Zoom efficient. This chart compares the number of hearings held in the 2nd Judicial District Court in 2019. The blue color to those held in 2020, the orange color. You will see in March, when the courthouse closed and the following month, we had the biggest comparative difference. In July and September, the court heard more matters than those months in 2019 in normal time. In all, the court held 26,971 hearings in 2020, compared to 31,268 hearings in 2019. This is a 13.7% decrease in hearings from the year before. Also noteworthy is the number of hearings which required an interpreter. During 2020, 1,366 hearings required an interpreter with 15 different languages. The next chart compares the number of orders filed in 2019 with those filed in 2020. Interestingly, in March, we slightly increased the number of filed orders in March of 2019. In 2020, the court issued 60,511 orders, compared to 67,266 orders in 2019. This is only a 10.04% decrease in 2020 compared to the year before, keeping in mind we closed the courthouse on March 17th. The next chart represents the difference between new cases filed in 2019 versus 2020. There was 4,342 case reduction cases, which is in 2020 versus 2019, which is a 22.8% decrease in new case filings. Notably, the new cases decreased by 22.8%, while the number of orders and hearings only decreased by a lesser percent of 10.04 and 13.7 respectively. I cannot express how proud I am that the court was able to continue to serve the public in this manner during the pandemic. Now for our challenges. Chairman Leak to the 8th Judicial District in Las Vegas. As you can imagine, it was not without challenges. We had a steep learning curve for judges, staff, and litigants with respect to Zoom and other remote applications. Many of our litigants did not have access to Zoom, so we built a space for them to access it safely at the courthouse. It was difficult to secure equipment to outfit all employees. While we are still in need of approximately 30 laptops for staff, technical problems were inevitable. Power outages, microphones that didn't work, spotty Wi-Fi, not to mention cats, dogs, kids, and everything else you can imagine appearing in the background trying to get into our court proceedings. We've also had some pretty funny experiences. We've had experiences in my personal experience from handling the MAT, or medically assisted treatment specialty court, where my drug addicts in recovery find their way to Zoom every Monday afternoon. I had one individual who used Zoom from a restaurant bathroom. We had court participants from a Sandy hut. We had one individual that was shirtless. And frankly, we had a divorced couple in family court that decided to divorce, but yet they were in bed together during a Zoom presentation. Let me share with you, in my MAT court, I have my individuals showing up on time when they're supposed to now on Zoom, and they're using it sometimes better than some of our well-appointed attorneys that have a difficult time figuring out Zoom. It's working. Justice is being administered despite these challenges, thanks to the Zoom platform. Now, as far as jury trials are concerned, we stopped all jury trials in March, but began meeting with stakeholders shortly thereafter to begin discussions about what was necessary to resume them. After developing a robust jury trial resumption plan to include all CDC recommended measures regarding social distancing and masks, and retrofitting courtrooms with plexiglass, we resumed trials in September. We conducted 3 before the stay-at-home 2.0 order was issued. Because we're still under that order, we cannot continue to conduct jury trials as we speak. However, once conditions improve and it's safe to do so, we will continue with jury trials in our courtrooms designed to mitigate COVID as safe as we can. Of course, our focus is criminal jury trials to begin as well. Now, one of the things that we have taken into consideration and continue to do so is that courts and judges have the power to summon citizens to be jurors. We believe that power should be used carefully, it should be used fairly and safely. So when we think about commencing jury trials, we always have to think about bringing jurors to the courthouse and have the ability to have them serve. And we have the power to do so. But again, we must use that power carefully. Successes. We've also had some incredible successes in the 2nd Judicial District. We rapidly advanced our technical knowledge throughout the court. Like it or not, we rapidly learned how to connect our own equipment to troubleshoot problems we previously would have called someone to assist us with, to share screens, and to add virtual backgrounds. We've installed an electronic line management system in the Resource Center, an electronic checkout system in the Law Library, and with the assistance of CARES funding through Washoe County, built a large, complex litigation courtroom in a space that was once occupied by employees who are now working remotely. Most importantly, we mitigated the risk of COVID within the court and among those we serve. We've had only one exposure at work, which was an employee working at the Washoe County Jail in pretrial release services. Our employees and stakeholders report an overwhelming sense of gratitude in the way we've prioritized their well-being. One of our successes has been the continuation of the Lawyer in the Library program throughout the pandemic. The Second Judicial District Court has had a Lawyer in the Library program since December 1999 that serves individuals who have legal needs. Volunteer lawyers assist individuals at no charge for a 10 to 15-minute session. Family law is on Tuesdays, general law on Wednesdays, and probate law on the first and third Wednesday of the month. Appointment times vary between 3 and 7 p.m., depending on availability. We continue to provide this service throughout 2020 and transition from in-person to virtual using Zoom in March. In 2020, the program served 1,233 people with 196 volunteers. As you can see, the demand continues to outpace the need. The feedback from counsel and participants has been overwhelmingly positive in the Zoom environment. I anticipate we will continue with a virtual option even after we're able to offer this service in person. There are many more things to share, but it's not possible in the time frame allowed for today. I invite you to observe an online hearing, which is accessible at www.washoecourts.com. Once we're open, I invite you to tour our courthouses. The historic courthouse is particularly impressive and filled with Nevada history. I'll leave you with one thought which sums up the dramatic changes we've made during the past year. It's pretty wild that we used to eat cake after someone had blown up. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Judge Freeman. You know, one of the downsides of us all being on mute is you didn't get to hear us laughing. At least I was laughing pretty hysterically at some of those stories you told, particularly the married couple in bed together getting a divorce. I mean, that just sounds like
it is one of the most amazing things you've ever seen, to see addicts in recovery getting on Zoom and sitting in their car when they're in court. And the only thing I have to remind them is to take off their baseball cap, which is backwards, to remind them that they're in court.
Yeah, you remind me, I was on some kind of court hearing not too long ago, and I think there was actually an attorney who was on the beach participating, which I thought was pretty unusual. I got to be honest, a little jealous. I think he was going to do some surfing, but yeah, it's a new reality that we're getting used to. And, you know, obviously want to thank you for the Second Judicial District being flexible and transitioning. I'm particularly impressed that you were able to do more hearings in a couple of the calendar months this year than you were last year. And I think that speaks to the flexibility of the court and trying to make sure that you're servicing everybody. So thank you so much for doing that, and for, you know, all the COVID mitigation measures, because I know you were on here when Judge Bell presented, but obviously it's a concern to make sure that we keep cases moving through the system as best as we can, and certainly appreciate the challenges and want to thank you for taking those on. So let me get here to my gallery view and see who has a question for Judge Freeman. So we'll start with Vice Chair Wynn, and then we'll take some others.
Hi, Judge Freeman. Thank you again so much for the presentation. I actually was laughing out loud, and I'm easily amused maybe, but thank you for that levity in this situation. I know we deal with a lot of serious things, so thank you for that. I have a question. Of some of the procedures or policies that you've instituted in your courts with regard to COVID, are any of those that you see carrying on into the future because they've been successful?
I do. One of the things that I've been so impressed about is judicial settlement conferences. One of the things that I've seen in my experience during COVID is that during a settlement conference, you require the adjuster to be present, to have the ability to settle a civil case. And typically, what I've experienced sometimes is an adjuster will have a certain level of authority to settle a case, who's been designated from the main office to come to the court during normal time from maybe Sacramento or another area that's closer. And then you're close to settling the case as a judicial officer, and you say, well, we've got the right number. And then all of a sudden the adjuster from Sacramento says, I got to call the main office. And the main office has not been part of the process. They haven't felt the energy in the room, so to speak. And they go, well, start them $25,000 less. And all of a sudden you're at square one. Now with Zoom, I get the adjuster from Kentucky in front of me while I'm trying to settle the case. And to me, that's been very invaluable in judicial settlements, for example. In addition, in the Second Judicial District, probably similar to Judge Bell, nothing has stopped with the exception of jury trials. Each judge, although we've changed our business model, each judge has a morning in custody criminal docket, out of custody criminal docket. We have civil cases, everything continues on. So the question then becomes, from a convenience perspective, is it possible to have witnesses testify or people with that have medical conditions? Can they testify by Zoom? Previously, we had video depositions in civil cases, but I find Zoom to be a phenomenal tool sometimes, keeping in mind the balance between the right of confrontation, the ability for jurors to see facial expression live in court, but it's certainly something that we've been exploring. In addition, in Washoe County, I've been negotiating with the sheriff's office related to jail transport. In the 8th, they do some arraignments by video. We've not done that in Washoe County. So there could be some cost-saving measures I'm looking into related to normal time versus Zoom related to jail transport, because of course our jail is distant, not far, but distant from the courthouse. So there's always those safety concerns about transporting inmates.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, not really a question, Judge Freeman, but I just agree with your position on the value of Zoom. And one of the issues you might recall that we talked about in this committee last session was, traffic tickets and why do so many people not show up in court. And I think one of the conclusions we reached is, most people want to take care of their business, but it can be extraordinarily inconvenient for someone to have to go to court on a random weekday, to drive down there, find parking. I'm speaking of Las Vegas in particular, go through security, navigate the elevators. So, anything we can do, I think, to help, particularly in some of those more minor cases, help folks to participate from where they are. I think that's probably a win all the way around, and hopefully will eliminate some of the non-appearances and resulting warrants that happen. So, again, commend you to do as much of that as you can with balancing the competing interests to make sure that folks have access to the courtroom in a convenient way. So, thank you for that and for thinking ahead.
That's a great point. I'll share with you very briefly, Chair, during our chief judges meeting. I'm going to give as they say, a shout out to Judge Tyrus in Incline Village in North Lake Tahoe. Judge Tyrus, when he meets with us, does exactly that. He does remote citations with tourists that visit the North Shore of Lake Tahoe remotely. And he is on the cutting edge in that regard. So he really shares with us what he does with those citations. And that's a time that has to come, when somebody's visiting from the Bay Area, going skiing, and they pick up a speeding ticket. The fact that they can do it remotely from their Bay Area home is just something we're thinking about.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I should have mentioned Judge Tyrus as well. I know he's been, at the forefront of trying to figure out how to do these video appearances, and I've had a chance to watch some of those on the YouTube channel, and I'm hopeful that at some point we can do that down in Clark County. The volume, I think, is a little bit higher, but we still have a lot of folks coming in from California as well that, it's hard for them to get back. So, committee will probably be talking about traffic citations at some point during the session. And, at that point, we'll discuss that further. And I would certainly encourage committee members to reach out and try to watch some of those hearings online, the traffic ones in particular. I think they're fascinating, and I think it's the best of court innovation. So do we have other questions? You can go ahead and show me a hand. I think I have the gallery view up now. Questions for Judge Freeman? I don't see questions, Judge. I did want to ask you one quickly. I know we asked you, obviously, to keep your presentation very short, but I wanted to inquire about the specialty courts and the COVID and the pandemic. And, have you been able to keep operating those courts during the pandemic? Has it been, difficult? Is there a wait list? Just sort of a 10,000-foot view on how the specialty courts are going in the second.
Sure. So what's exciting in the second district court is that last year, we were able to cajole Judge Palaha, who was finishing his term after a very, very distinguished career on the bench, to be our specialty court judge. He handled all of our specialty courts, which were, of course, drug court, diversion court, mental health court, veterans court, medically assisted treatment court, reentry court, and mental health court. Upon his retirement, I am proud to say that our district court judges stepped up, and each one of us now handles a particular court. And then those of us that are not the handling specialty court judge are the backups in case there's a conflict by that handling judge. Vice Chief Lynn Simons is our liaison, if you will, in specialty court. And I'll share with you the most impressive thing to me is that we haven't lost a beat, Chair Yeager, in terms of our specialty court participants. In fact, there are more. And so our resources, although always are stretched thin, the ability for the offenders to show up on time, to be clean and sober, and to assimilate themselves into society have been very impressive. So as we work our way through specialty courts, each one of our judges is a specialist, so to speak, in their specialty court. Mental health court, veterans court, reentry court, medically assisted treatment court, drug court and diversion court. And these judges that are assigned to their particular court have taken a lot of pride in this additional assignment, which we didn't have before in-house. As you may recall, historically, in the Second Judicial District Court, the famous and well-respected Judge Breen and Judge Blake were our senior judges that spearheaded our specialty courts. That evolved to Judge Blaha. Now it's evolved to individual judges. And the reason why that's important is because our business plans for our court are a bit different than in a Clark County because of our population and amount of judges. So for us to change a business plan from one judge handling specialty court to going individual is quite a change for us. And I'm pleased to report that we have not missed a beat. Our judges have stepped up, and I'm just so proud of actually the folks in recovery that they are responding. You are going to get that one or two offender that's high, and you're going to tell that they're high. And so you say, listen, there's sanctions for being high, but the judges read it, they deal with it, they address it, they give second chances. We try to get people on the road for recovery to try to make them productive members of our society. So I'm real pleased about our specialty court.
Thank you so much, Judge Freeman. Last call for questions. Any other questions for Judge Freeman? Okay, Judge, I think you're off the hook. I don't see any other questions. Again, members, if you have questions Assemblywoman Gonzalez, did you have one?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assembly District 16. I was just curious, are there any evaluations for your specialty programs to see if the specialty courts are, targeting those needs that you have them set up for?
Oh, 100%. We have outcomes. We have outcomes reported for us to get our funding from the specialty court funding source, which is the administrative office of the courts. We have to provide how many offenders we have, what the outcomes are, their recidivism rates, whether they come back and repeat. Oh, absolutely. The one thing that's really impressive about specialty court and why we look to increase its awareness is because I'll share with you, Assemblywoman, that in my experience, and I've been a criminal lawyer for 27 years before I was 8 years on the bench, 95%, in my opinion, of criminal cases are drug and alcohol related, mostly drug and mostly methamphetamine right now. When you see the craziest criminal cases, it is methamphetamine to the max. And when I say that, that's what specialty court addresses. Addicts have to make the decision when it's their turn not to be an addict anymore. We can't sanction them. We can't do that. We can separate them from society by a criminal sentencing, but we can't go into their head and say, you got to stop being an addict. They have to make the decision. And when they do, my experience has been tremendous success. That's what specialty courts do. So we keep track of those stats. We keep track of who's in. Judges make a careful decision when they decide somebody gets the privilege. It's a privilege to be in specialty court. You don't get it just because you get it. It's one of those things where the right things have to be put together, and then an individual will be in specialty court. We hope they'll be successful. But we absolutely are statistic driven. And frankly, that's where our funding comes from, is to show those statistics.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
welcome. Any further questions? Okay, now I think you're off the hook, Judge Freeman. Again, thanks for being here this morning. I'm sure we'll see you in committee several times in the next 112 or 13 days. But for now, thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. It's nice seeing everyone. And thank you again for your patience in listening to our presentation. And yes, you'll see me around. Thank you very much. I appreciate it and have a great day.
Thanks, you too. All right, committee. So we're through 2 of our presentations and we have 2 more to go. We're going to transition from the 2 largest judicial districts in the state to presentations from a couple of law enforcement agencies. Just so the committee knows, you obviously have the agenda in front of you. We're going to hear from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, which, as the name states, is the Las Vegas area police force. And then we have sheriffs and chiefs on the agenda, which, well, I'll let Mr. Spratley sort of describe, where they are and what their mission is. We also have Washoe County Sheriff's Department. We are going to hear a presentation from them, just not today. Just so you know, that presentation is scheduled for a week from today on the 15th. So I didn't want you to think we left anybody out. We're just trying to manage everyone's schedule. So with that being said, we're going to move next to the overview of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. As per usual, there is a pretty comprehensive PowerPoint exhibit on Nellis that members can look at or members of the public can reference. And I want to welcome to the committee Mr. Chuck Calloway, who is the Police Director, Office of Intergovernmental Services at Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Mr. Calloway and I have been working together on these issues since 2013. I think he's been working on them a heck of a lot longer than that. But Mr. Calloway, we're happy to have you back at the legislative session, even if only virtual. And when you're ready, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chuck Calloway, Director of Intergovernmental Services for Metro. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today and present. I wish it was in person and not through this format. As the chairman said, I have a very lengthy presentation. I'm going to fly through it at lightning speed because I know that you'll have a lot of questions for me. So with that, I'm not a real technical savvy guy, so let's see if we can get this to work the proper way. And can everybody see that?
I don't think we can see it yet, but we have some technical support on the line who I think will be able to help as well. So if you just hang tight for a second.
This is broadcast. If you could go
Okay.
to the bottom half of your screen on the Zoom screen where it says share screen, and you should be able to click on that and choose the application in which you'd like to display.
Okay, I thought I hit it, but it's not working. So let me try to get out of here now.
Are you sharing from the PowerPoint or from the Zoom application?
Okay. Can you see that?
We are looking good. And if you could pull it into full screen.
Okay, and sorry, I got to go backwards here. Okay.
You are fine.
Got that?
That looks great. Looks great.
All right. Thank you. I apologize for that. Like I said, I'm not a real tech savvy person. So like I said, I'm going to go really quick through this. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is the 10th largest police department in the country, depending on whose numbers you look at. We were formed in 1973 by your body, the state legislature. It was a merger of the Clark County Sheriff's Office and the Las Vegas Municipal Police Force. We fall under the leadership of an elected sheriff. The current sheriff is Sheriff Joe Lombardo. I've had the privilege of working for 5 sheriffs during my career with Metro. I've been with Metro for, this is my 32nd year on the force. Like most major agencies, we have vision, values, mission statement, and goals. Our vision has stayed the same over the last decade or so. It's to be the safest community in America. This last year, we actually had the Sheriff's Leadership School, which is a group of folks that go through leadership training. They work to revise our mission and our goals. As you can see at the bottom, we've changed those to be more progressive and up with the times, and we've included leadership, accountability, and reform in our goals. And our values also remain the same: integrity, courage, accountability, respect, and excellence. I'm going to go through some basic facts about the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. The numbers that are in my presentation I got in mid-January when I was asked by the committee to do this presentation. As you know, an agency our size, numbers can change on a daily basis. People leave, people get hired. So these numbers are from mid-January. Currently, we have about 3,301 police officers, 1,357 civilians, 4,658 full-time employees. We have 929 corrections officers in CCDC, 346 civilian employees in CCDC, and 33 county employees. Our department oversees a jurisdiction of 7,560 square miles and a population of about 2 million residents and 43 tourists a year before the pandemic hit. Special events, I was going to take this slide off. I had it from my previous slide that I did at the last legislative session, but I thought it was important to show the difference between what is normal and what happened during the pandemic. During a normal year prior to the pandemic, our agency handled about 7,806 special events. It's about 21 events a day, and those range everything from Electric Daisy Carnival to conventions, NASCAR, sporting events, New Year's Eve, events that private entities hold where they hire officers to work overtime for those events. And after 2020, we saw that we did see a decrease in special events, but it wasn't as big of a decrease as we thought. You know, we still had 5,814 events, an average of about 15 a day. Many of those, some of those occurred prior to March when the shutdown occurred. But we still had, as you know, even though there weren't full spectators at the Allegiant Stadium, for example, we still had officers working those events, the sporting events, and we also had officers augmenting some of the hotels, which I'll get into a little bit later when we talk about crime trends. Our communications center, we usually receive about, on average, 3 million calls for service and about 1.1 million 911 calls per year. We have 107 dispatchers and 80 call takers, and we averaged about a 6-minute response for priority events, which would be those 911 calls. The numbers can vary, obviously, but on average, it's about 6 minutes. Our patrol areas that we cover, our jurisdiction, primary jurisdiction, covers 10 area commands. We also have resident officers such as Laughlin and out in Logandale and Jean, Searchlight area. And we have our airport substation that's inside of McCarran Airport. Our traffic section handled 22,059 traffic collisions in 2020. About half of those are injury accidents. That's a slight increase over 21,891 in 2019. We had 98 fatal collisions compared to 111 fatal collisions in 2019. And we had 3,846 DUI arrests. And again, a slight uptick from 2019. Talk briefly about my office. I work directly for Sheriff Lombardo. I am the Director of Intergovernmental Services. I have 2 officers that work for me, Officer AJ Delap and Officer Chris Reese. I also have a legislative assistant, Neo Vidal. And my job is primarily to assist you and to liaison with local government, with state government and federal representatives. We typically, during a legislative session, track about 400 bills that impact public safety and Metro in some form or fashion. I believe this session will probably be no different. We represent the sheriff and the agency to a number of local entities, whether it's the county commission, the city council, private entities, and our ultimate goal is to ensure public safety in the valley. We also help you and other electeds with constituent issues when we have cases where one of your constituents is upset or feels like they didn't receive proper service. we're here to help you with that. We're also here to help you with any issues that occur with Metro that you have questions about or concerns about. We do zoning and planning issues. We work with our electeds on the local level regarding ordinances. We also assist our foreign consulates when victims who come to Clark County are from other countries. They get victimized. In rare cases, some of those folks are actually the suspects in crimes, and they end up in the detention facility. We have folks that lose their passports, and whenever the consulate reaches out to us, we assist with that. We also assist with dignitary visits, but we don't do protection. We help with tours, and the Fusion Center folks actually assist with whatever protection needs would be needed. And then we obviously assist in interim committees and boards. I myself, I think I'm on like 6 different committees and boards, including the Advisory Commission to the Administration of Justice, the Nevada Sentencing Commission, the Attorney General's Substance Abuse Working Group, the Homeless to Housing Committee, just to name a few that I currently participate in. Our agency is not just uniform patrol, obviously. We have specialized units that include our CSI folks that process crime scenes, SWAT, K-9, our forensics lab, our detective bureau. And I must say that one of Sheriff Lombardo's priorities when he took office was to decentralize our detective bureau and move detectives out to the area commands so that when citizens are victims of a crime, the detectives are right there on the front line with the officers, and you're getting a quicker service versus having a detective bureau up in the ivory tower, so to speak, and taking days for a case to get up to a detective. And we've really seen the benefits in that. This picture in the bottom left-hand corner shows our homicide unit. And I must say that our homicide unit has a solvability rate of currently 92%, which is pretty much unheard of in the country. Most agencies hover around 60% of a solvability rate. So if you think about that for just a moment, if you commit murder in some other jurisdictions, you've got just a little under a 50% chance of getting away with it. And that's murder victims, their families that never get closure, that never see justice. But in Clark County, you have less than an 8% chance of getting away with it. And I think that's an important thing. And I kudos to our detectives that on a daily basis are out solving those homicides and violent crimes. Our search and rescue unit last year handled 111 rescues, 66 helicopter rescues, 127 people saved, and 144 flight hours. We get a lot of visitors who come to town and they go out to Red Rock and they go hiking, or they don't understand the desert environment and they get out and they don't have adequate water or supplies, or they get lost. And search and rescue does a phenomenal job of going out and locating those individuals. And we have volunteers that assist with that. And they are playing an important role in rescuing folks. The Southern Nevada Counterterrorism Center is the state's fusion center. It's located in our headquarters building at Las Vegas Metro. We house the Nevada Joint Terrorism Task Force there, which is made up of representatives from both local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. We manage risk management, emergency management, and all hazard response out of the Fusion Center. Since COVID hit, we've had an operations center up and running, monitoring COVID numbers, both within our agency and in the public. They do real-time analytical work, looking at data and numbers that come in crime related. And in fact, it was our ANSEC folks, we call them ANSEC for short, the analytical section. It was our ANSEC folks that provided me much of the data that you see on this on these slides today. And then, of course, we have our See Something, Say Something program out of the Fusion Center, because ultimately we can't do it alone. We rely on the public's eyes to assist and help us with seeing things that just don't look right and reporting those. MACTAC training is an important component of what we do. After the Mumbai attacks in 2009, we actually sent officers to India to learn from that incident. As you remember, that was a coordinated terrorist attack on some hotels, and we saw that if that became a trend, that the Las Vegas Strip was potential high risk for that type of activity. So since then, we've developed a very robust MACTAC training for officers to respond to any type of terrorist attack of that nature which might occur. We also provide training to entities outside of law enforcement. And obviously, on October 1, some of this training was used during that incident as well. Metro's budget is defined under NRS 280. I believe that for public entities, we have one of the most transparent budget processes there is. We have a fiscal affairs committee, which is made up, you see the members there on the left. It's made up of a citizen at large who's the chair, Mr. Macbeth, and then it's made up of 2 members of the city council and 2 members of the county commission. The meetings are held, I believe now they're held monthly, and they're open to the public for the public to participate. And all decisions regarding Metro's budget are funneled through the Fiscal Affairs Committee. I want to talk about collaborative reform because this is a very in-depth topic, and I'm sure throughout the session, police reform will be a topic. Most of you remember that in 2011, around November, the Review Journal did a series of newspaper articles about Metro's use of force. And it was not a pretty picture, obviously. We had some issues at that time, and Sheriff Gillespie at the time knew that based on that article and based on community pressure, that there was a high likelihood that there would, if no action was taken, there would be a dissent decree on our agency. He took the initiative to do something that was never done before, which was reach out to the Department of Justice and embark upon a collaborative reform model. Members of the Department of Justice came to our agency, and we worked hand in hand with them. They identified 75 areas and made 75 recommendations where they felt that we could make improvements to reduce deadly use of force on our agency and use of force in general. We worked to complete all of those recommendations, and it involved transforming policies, procedures, and the culture of our agency. And I'm not going to tell you as we go through this presentation that Metro's perfect. Obviously, we have a long ways to go. I believe we're a very progressive agency. We're always striving to update our policies and procedures and adopt best practices. What we have done based on the collaborative reform model, and again, remember, this goes back to around 2011, early 2012, when a lot of these measures started taking place. So we've been at this reform business for quite a while. We established our Office of Internal Oversight and Constitutional Policing. We did a complete overhaul of our use of force policy with stakeholder input. One of the things we immediately did in our policy was to add a sanctity of life clause in the policy. And I'll get into them in a minute to more changes that we've made to the policy. We implemented mandatory training for all officers on de-escalation. We implemented reality-based training with more of a focus on de-escalating and using lesser means of force. We implemented fair and impartial policing training, training on dealing with the mentally ill. We created a cert and fit process, which anytime there is an officer involved use of deadly force, it's a bifurcated process. So you have a cert team which does an internal review. They go out and do an investigation to determine if policies, procedures, and training were not adhered to or were violated. The fit process, on the other hand, is a criminal investigation to determine if the officer's actions were criminal in nature. They put together independent reports, which are then sent to, the fit report is sent to the district attorney's office for review so that the district attorney's office can make a determination of whether or not the case was justified or not and either charge the officer criminally, or if the case will go to what's called the PIFR, which is the police fact-finding review process, where an ombudsman and a process takes place to review what happened and answer questions and show basically to the public what happened. We also implemented a very timely release of information. We were and may still be. I'm not sure what a lot of other agencies are doing at this point, but we were one of the few agencies in the country that was doing a 72-hour briefing to the public, where we would release any body camera footage we have. We would have either the undersheriff or one of the assistant sheriffs provide an overview of what occurred. We would answer questions from the media. And then, of course, within 48 hours, we would release the name of the officer or officers that were involved. We have taken an effort to build stronger community relationships. We established an Office of Community Engagement that I'll talk more about in a second, and the Sheriff's Multicultural Advisory Committee. As a result of collaborative reform, since 2010, we've seen a significant decrease in our officer-involved use of force. The decrease has been approximately 36% since 2010. We've improved our community relationships, I believe. Again, there's still a long ways for us to go. As a result, we've had a number of agencies across the country come to us and look at our policy changes, look at what the 75 recommendations that we took, and also inquire about how they could implement collaborative reform in their jurisdictions. And again, more work needs to be done in this area. I would encourage the committee to go to this website and that's listed here, the link, and you can pull up all 3 reports. I believe it's the initial report with the 75 recommendations. There's a second report that was the halfway point, where we had completed some of the recommendations, but we were still working on it. And then the final report from the Department of Justice, when most of the recommendations at that point had been completed. I would encourage you to take a look at those documents and see for yourself what was done during that time period. We were one of the first agencies in 2013, one of the first major police departments to establish a body-worn camera pilot program. We worked in the legislature very close with then Senator Aaron Ford on a body camera bill, and also with Assemblyman Mumford at the time on a body camera bill. As you can imagine, there was initially some reluctancy among officers. We had to go to collective bargaining with the unions to encourage officers to wear cameras. We were able to say, if you're a new hire, you automatically have to wear it. But over the years since 2013, I think that every officer I've talked to now sees the benefit of a body-worn camera, and I have officers tell me that they wouldn't go on the street without one. They're just they're a win-win for everyone, the community and the officer. That we use them for a variety of purposes, such as training. We're able to show where mistakes were made and use them for training purposes. We're able to, as I said, use them in our press conferences when an incident occurs for transparency, and also for accountability, of course. In 2020, we had 893 officers that complaints were made against them by citizens. When the body camera footage was reviewed, it determined that the complaints that were alleged did not occur. But by contrast, we had 136 cases where the body camera footage actually showed that what the complainant said did occur, and that resulted in discipline for the officers in those cases. Other areas of police reform that we've been engaged in, our use of force policy updates never stop. As recently as a month ago, I believe we made some additional updates to our policy. We had a duty to intervene clause in our policy prior to AB 3 during the special session back in August. We also had duty to provide medical assistance and to place a person in a recovery position, which was added into our policy, I want to say, May of last year, prior to the incident with Mr. Floyd, the unfortunate incident in Minnesota. We have mandatory training on ethics, values, bias-based policing, and discrimination. We've also implemented training on discrimination in the workforce. We have an early intervention program that we call Blue Team, which allows supervisors to monitor use of force by officers and see if there's trends that are occurring so that early action can be taken to mitigate that. We also recently created a new policy for protests and civil unrest. We learned a lot of lessons. I have a slide on that I'll get into in a minute, but we learned a lot of lessons over the past year in regards to protests and civil unrest. And so we've created a new policy to help us do a better job at that. We've also implemented stronger criteria for our field training officers and supervisors. We have our use of force board members, citizens that actually come out to use of force scenes and see for themselves the scene and what occurred. We removed the LVNR neck restraint from our policy. I believe were taking steps to do that prior, again, to AB3 during the special session. We have stronger criteria for our field training officers. We have use of force statistical report that is on lvmpd.com. I would encourage the committee to go to lvmpd.com. You will find a lot of information there, including our after action report regarding the protests, our annual use of force report that comes out, just a ton of information that will be helpful to you. Our budget is on lvmpd.com. And then we also established our body-worn camera policy and compliance report, where we're able to monitor compliancy of officers turning on their body cameras. And if an officer is non-compliant, we're able to identify that and again take measures for accountability to ensure accountability. We established a behavioral health unit, which is made up of a number of officers that monitor legal 2000s and mental health issues. We've also partnered with some clinicians on that. And then we are in the process through some private funding of building a regional training facility. It's currently under construction. The goal of that is to provide the state-of-the-art training on de-escalation and reducing use of force. That facility is under construction, and when it's done, we hope that it will be a facility that it can be used statewide by a number of agencies. I believe it's like 80 different agencies that have shown an interest in using that facility and partnering with us once it's completed. Our Office of Community Engagement was established to support the department's commitment to building relationships with the community. It focuses on outreach and engagement and education. It expands. Every officer, when they go through training, is taught about the community policing model and the community policing process. Get out in your community, get out of the car, meet people face to face, meet your business owners, walk streets. After incidents, we encourage officers to, we have a policy where if we have a major incident, such as a barricade in your neighborhood and some of the houses get evacuated, we encourage officers to go door to door and knock on the door and explain to citizens what happened, so people see an officer's face and they know what occurred. Obviously when time and resources permit. The community engagement unit just expands on the traditional community policing model. I know just recently the community engagement unit assisted the Mexican consulate with some training on one side for officers, changes to the cards that are issued in Mexico for consulates to recognize and know that those are valid when they see them, and also training for the consulate on some things that we see that could help members of the Mexican community. So we're always engaged with the faith-based community as well. Some of the community programs, I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk fast and I get tongue-tied, but some of the programs that we have, that we've had some of these for many years, is number one, our First Tuesday program. Every first Tuesday of the month, the area commands are open, where you can go to the area command in your jurisdiction and you can meet with the captain that runs that area command. You can meet with the officers. You can bring up issues that you have in your neighborhoods. You can get to know the officers face to face, and those are a great opportunity to find out. They usually have a presentation where they talk about crime trends. We have the Crime Stoppers program, which we're engaged in. We have our Citizens Police Academy, which I know Chairman Yeager has taken part in. We have a Hispanic Citizens Police Academy also that's conducted in Spanish. We have our Explorer program, Neighborhood Watch, our Honor Guard, Multicultural Advisory Committee, and Trauma Intervention, just to name a few. The Every 15 Minutes program, which probably because of COVID, I believe every 15 minutes has probably not been done over the last year, but that program was also very effective, where we go to schools and we show the kids the results of DUI driving and how what a negative impact that can have on your life, and help instill some good decision making in our youth that might steer them away from that type of behavior. I'm going to talk briefly about diversity. This is an area that we need to do better in. But when it comes to local government, we are, again, I believe, very progressive in this area. Our agency has active recruiting going on. Because of COVID, we have 2 full-time recruiters, but because of COVID, we've had to switch more to social media type recruiting. But our recruiters are actively engaged in specifically trying to get members of the minority community to become police officers. To be honest, it's getting harder to find anyone who wants to become a police officer nowadays, let alone members of specific communities. So it's a challenge for us. The numbers you see there are our current numbers. We're about 33% female, about 19% Hispanic, 10% Black, 6% Asian. Asian is very represented on our agency. We're making every effort to try to fix that, but I think there's some cultural issues there, distrust of law enforcement that result in that. But that's an area where we're focused on. In addition to the other areas, we have the sheriff has a Hispanic recruitment council, a Black and Asian recruitment council, and also we use the Black Police Officers Association to help us, the Explorers program to help us try to recruit. It's a work in progress, and we're desperately trying to get there. Our diversity section submits a report to the EEOC regarding our diversity. And of course, as an agency, when our numbers don't match the population, we have to answer for that. So it is something that we're very cognizant of, and it's something that's important to the community, and we're working hard to get those numbers looking better. I know it was mentioned by the judges earlier, and I'm not going to go into much detail other than to say that we have a policy where whenever possible, officers who encounter juveniles in delinquent situations or even specific crimes, that we're trying to divert those juveniles into other systems instead of the detention center or incarceration. That we work closely with the Harbor, with the Family Justice Court, Family Justice Center, to get juveniles diverted out of those into those programs and out of the jail. So our policy says that whenever possible, we don't arrest juveniles, we get them into the detention center. Now, with that being said, like I said, sometimes there's no choice in the matter. I think our numbers last year were about 3,000 juvenile arrests that we made during 2020. But again, a lot of work needs to be done there, but I think we're making progress in that area. I want to talk really quick about emergency vehicle operation reform. Back, I think it was 2009, 2010. I was up here at the legislative session, so it was 2009. We had a number of officers who lost their lives in traffic accidents. And we took an initiative. We realized that there was some cultural problems there. Officers driving too fast for conditions above the speed limit, officers not wearing seatbelts. There was this mindset out there that if you wore your seatbelt, you wouldn't be able to get out of the car fast enough and you were going to get killed. And obviously, there was no evidence or data to support that. So we made the effort to try to change that culture in the agency. We implemented a program called 365 Alive, which was a daily, when officers met in the briefing room, it was a daily push to instill in them that you have to wear your seatbelt, slow down. If you don't arrive on the call, you can't assist on the call. And we took a lot of measures to change officers' driving patterns. And as a result, we saw a 34% decrease in officer-involved collisions. In 2013, our agency received the Safer Way Award after a 41% reduction in vehicle pursuits. We changed our vehicle pursuit policy to limit when officers pursue. And we also were recognized by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Mental illness is a huge issue for our agency. As I alluded to earlier, we've taken steps to try to build a mental health unit. Resources are always an issue. Our crisis intervention teams, currently every officer that goes through the academy receives CIT training. We provide referrals to a number of agencies that assist with mental health. It's a 40-hour course that the officers go through. We handle about 30,000 calls a year related to the mentally ill. And again, whenever possible, we want to divert people to resources that can help them versus incarceration. So it's, again, an area that needs more work. In our 2019 budget, we proposed building that mental health unit that I spoke of. Currently has 4 officers, 2 corrections officers, and a clinician and a case manager. We monitor legal 2000s to identify chronic cases, and then we provide follow-up and referral services when we identify those chronic cases. We coordinate with services in CCDC and other community stakeholders to try to get people the help and treatment they need. And then, again, the goal is to prevent incarceration and prevent violent encounters, because we have noticed that some of our use of force incidents, unfortunately, involve individuals with mental health issues who are in crisis. So this is a key area that we're trying to fix in our communities. Homelessness is another challenge that we face on a daily basis. Last year, we had 20,462 contacts with homeless individuals in Clark County. We were able to get services to about 6,213 of those individuals. We actually, success story, working with our partners, we were able to get 760 people off the street and into some form of housing. We have a team called the MORE team, which is a mobile outreach team. We have 8 officers assigned to that. They receive special training. Their goal is not enforcement, but it's helping people get treatment. I know that about 2 years ago now, I believe it was, there was a city ordinance that was passed about sleeping on the sidewalk, and a lot of concerns and questions came into our agency that we were going to go out and just round people up that were sleeping on the sidewalk and take them to jail. That's not something that's been done. Our goal, again, is to get people off the street and get them help. Enforcement is always a last resort. And then talk briefly about the Clark County Detention Center. We have seen a significant decline in our daily occupancy. We dropped down, those of you who remember the presentation from last legislative session, our numbers were over 4,000. We were at maximum capacity. We have dropped down to the current, this sheet says 2,940. I believe the document that I looked at this morning from the detention center showed 2,861 is our current occupancy level. We average around 55,958 bookings a year. Our bookings have decreased by over 13% since 2007. Even prior to the pandemic, our numbers of bookings were trending down. We have a policy in place that misdemeanor bookings that are not mandatory in nature, such as DUI or domestic violence, that they need supervisor approval to book on those cases, and arrest must be necessary. Otherwise, those are denied, and someone will either be issued a ticket or a Class 2 citation. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, it shows our booking numbers. 54% of our bookings are felonies, 5% gross misdemeanor, and 39% misdemeanor. Average daily population is about 85% felony. We engage in a number of alternatives to incarceration. Again, if you saw this presentation last legislative session, our numbers for offenders who are on electronic monitoring program has over doubled, I believe. I don't remember what the numbers were last session, but I think it was like 300 or 400. And obviously now we're up to 943. Part of that has been due to the pandemic and us getting more resources available from the courts to put more people out on electronic monitoring. We also partner with Hope for Prisoners, Veterans Administration, Social Security Administration. We worked with Senator Tick Segerblum a few sessions back before he left the Senate on SB 268, which allows us to assist inmates with getting ID cards when they're released from the facility so that they can cash checks or seek employment. And then we have a service provider contract with reentry specialists that meet with every inmate and assist them once they're about to be released with reentry into the community. Because of COVID-19, it's unfortunate that I have to say that all of our in-person programs have been suspended. We still have some virtual programs that inmates can participate in. We had on average about 6,827 inmates a year that participate in these programs that include adult education, anger management, Alcohol and Narcotics Anonymous, religious programs, coping with PTSD, and a number of other courses. The sheriff also is responsible for the Las Vegas Township Constables and also the Sheriff's Civil Bureau. The pandemic had significantly impacted the number of evictions that constables did over 2020. As you can see, evictions went down 83% due to the moratorium on evictions. They handled 27,000 cases, and those cases, in addition to evictions, include handling complaints of abandoned vehicles, writs of execution, garnishment of wages, and other civil type matters. And then the sheriff's civil process also covers all of Clark County. They serve protection orders for domestic violence, stalking, and harassment. They handle about 9,000 cases a year. We have a robust volunteer program at Metro. We have about 500 volunteers that volunteer over 160,000 hours. I can't say enough about these men and women. They are really selfless people. They, if you've ever come into the headquarters, they work in the front lobby, greeting people that come in. They issue visitor badges. They go to our First Tuesday events. They go to community events. They are just great people, all in all. And there's a lot of things we couldn't do as an agency without them. The Explorer program, also our numbers have suffered, I believe, because of the pandemic here. But it's a program for our youth to try to get kids interested in law enforcement and maybe take them down a career path of law enforcement, show them that the police are not the bad guys, and show them what law enforcement does. And it's been a very successful program. We also use that program for some of our recruiting purposes. So as I wrap this up, I'm getting close to the end. And again, I'm trying to move fast, so I apologize. I want to talk about major issues facing law enforcement. Last year saw a 96% increase of officer deaths, and that was due to COVID-19. It was the leading cause of law enforcement death, over 145 deaths. As essential workers, when other people had the ability to work from home or the ability to stay home, or some, unfortunately, obviously, were laid off from their jobs, and that's horrible. The officers out there, our job involves encountering the public and going out and dealing with situations. They don't have the luxury of working from home. So as a result of that, we had a number of officers that contracted COVID. We did have 2 employees that we lost last year, a lieutenant and a PSR, a service representative that we lost. But we also, in addition, last year across the country, there were 144 officers killed in the line of duty. We're seeing a trend across the country of attacks on officers. 45 suspects were killed or 45 officers rather were killed by suspects with firearms. We're also seeing violent crime uptick slightly. Our overall violent crime is down 4.5% compared to 2016. But when compared to 2019, we saw a slight uptick in murder. I believe we had 3 murders more this last year than we had the previous year. And we also saw a slight uptick in aggravated assaults. We also, as some of the previous slides showed, we continue to struggle with social issues such as mental health, substance abuse, homelessness. Unfortunately, law enforcement is often the front line on these issues. And our homeland security threat is evolving. We're seeing an increase in domestic terrorism related activity, which has obviously changed the focus of law enforcement from some of the threats we had that are still threats, but some of the threats we focused on in previous years with ISIS and foreign-born terrorism versus domestic terrorism. And then, of course, something we're constantly struggling with and we work to try to rectify is public trust and negative media. And as we all know, it only takes one person that's a bad apple somewhere in the United States to undo years of relationship building that has been done, and years of community engagement that has been done can be literally wiped away with the actions of one individual. And I believe we saw a lot of that this last year, unfortunately. Since during 2020, our agency handled 318 protests. Like I said earlier, when this initially started, I think that there was a mindset that our community would not see violent protesting. I think that there was a mindset that we had been working good with the community and had good community relationships. And as I said previously, there's always ways we can improve. But I think that we assumed that it wasn't going to happen in Las Vegas. And obviously, we did see some violent protests early on. The vast majority of these protests that we saw were peaceful. The vast majority of people that attended them were exercising their First Amendment rights and acting peacefully. But as you can see from these pictures, we did have individuals set our cars on fire. We had 45 officers injured, mostly from frozen water bottles being thrown. We had bricks thrown at officers, batteries thrown at officers. We had laser lights shined in officers' eyes, and a number of other things. We had one of our patrol cars there in the picture you can see was set on fire. We had 7 vehicles damaged overall. And we made 404 arrests. Again, most of those arrests occurred early on in the first few weeks of protesting. As time progressed, we got better at addressing the protests, and we made a better effort of reaching out to protest organizers to communicate with them and to mitigate any bad apples that might have jumped in with the protesters and might be trying to cause problems. And as a result of that, we saw these protests become more peaceful and less incidents occur. We released an after-action report on this. It's available again on our website. I would encourage you to take a look at it when you have time. We also completely revamped and updated our protest policy. We met with community stakeholders after some of the first protests, and we listened to their concerns about how our officers responded to the protests. And I think a lot of those concerns are reflected in the changes that were made to our policy. Basic crime statistics, like I said, we had a slight uptick in murders, 99 murders, 12 more than 2019. We had 1,118 sexual assaults. You can see the numbers here. I'm trying to go quickly, so I won't read through all of them. But overall, again, while most of the country saw a 40% increase on average of violent crime, our numbers don't reflect that significant of an increase in violent crime. And overall, our numbers show a decrease 13% in crime overall from 2019. And I think that's a reflection of the men and women who are out there on a daily basis and who are addressing these issues. As many of you probably heard on the news, we had an uptick in crime in our resort corridor on the Strip. We focused resources in that area, and as a result, we got over 551 illegal guns off the street from the Strip, and we made a number of arrests, and we've since seen the Strip become a much safer place. It's absolutely safe for people to go down there and visit us and spend time on the Strip. But we also saw that a number of those individuals that were there causing problems were coming in from California or other states. I believe it was close to 40% of the people that we ultimately arrested that were causing problems during that time period were actually not Nevada residents, but had come here to either escape pandemic restrictions in their own states, and they thought they could come to Nevada and cause havoc or whatever. I think the men and women out there on the Strip did a great job of reducing some of the crime trends we were starting to see there. Finally, I'll close with this. Don't take my word for it. I encourage you all to come do ride-alongs with us. Get a hold of me. I know during the session it's almost impossible. But after session, reach out to me. I will get you in a black and white out in an area command, preferably on a busy shift on a Friday night or a Saturday night, so you can see firsthand the types of calls that our officers have to handle, what the men and women go through on our agency. Get involved in our our Citizens Police Academy, see firsthand what our officers are being taught, what they're being trained. Take a tour of the jail, take a tour of the Fusion Center, take a tour of our crime lab. I encourage you to do that, and I'm here to assist you with that. And again, each of these slides, we could probably talk for a full day on each slide. I'm trying to go fast. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this point. And if I don't have an answer, I will get you an answer. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Calloway. I'm going to give you a little bit of a break because what I'm going to do, just to make sure we get through Mr. Spratley's slides, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the overview of the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, and then what we'll do is take questions for both of you after that. So without further ado, Mr. Spratley, I want to welcome you back to the Assembly Judiciary Committee. Like Mr. Calloway, Mr. Spratley and I have worked together on a number of these issues over the years, and it's a pleasure to have you here this morning. And when you're ready, please go ahead and give your presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Yeager and members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee for recognizing the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association and inviting us to present today. First of all, on behalf of the association, we would like to congratulate each of you on winning or retaining your seat. And we know that having you chosen to represent your district in the Nevada Legislature is a big deal, and that you will represent the voice of the people well. Mr. Chairman, just as a point of order, you guys have my slides. I just have a couple of them, and you also have my talking points. So I can just gloss over those and go over this in just like 2 minutes, hitting the highlights if you'd like.
That sounds great, Mr. Spratley. That'll leave us with a little bit more time for questions. So please go ahead.
So just real quick, the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs is not a new organization, been around since 1953. In the mid-70s, they became a 501c6 nonprofit association. And the goal of it is, this is not a good old boys club. It's very inclusive. It's not just sheriffs. It's not just chiefs of police. We're one of 3 organizations nationally that are sheriffs and chiefs combined associations, but we have folks from leadership from state departments and just a variety of law enforcement agencies in the organization. So just wanted to impress that with you. And I wanted to make note that the sheriffs and chiefs is not just the rurals. In that you're going to find that when you want to discuss something regarding law enforcement, it's going to be recommended that you talk to Chuck with Metro. You're going to talk to Washoe, and then for the rurals, you're going to talk to sheriffs and chiefs. And we actually, as you'll see in the talking points, if you peruse those, we include all law enforcement agencies, large and small, north, south, east, and west, and all have an equal voice and fellowship in our association. I will share my screen just real quick so you can have the slides. Let me just push that up here and share and go from beginning. We do have so our organizational chart. I just want to run through that really quickly.
Mr. Spratley, this is broadcast. If you could please put your PowerPoint presentation into full screen, we would appreciate that.
What I did, I apologize for that.
Oh, no, you're fine. That is looking great. Thank you. You may continue.
Just going to point out on our organizational chart that we have a lot of members, but it's not a lot numerically. We only have about 150 members, and only the CEOs of the law enforcement agencies are the voting members. And then again, that your sheriff and your local chief of police are members in our association. And all of those agency leaders, they lead about 11,000 sworn law enforcement officers in the state of Nevada, and many more times that civilian personnel that make up the great public safety effort throughout Nevada. Also, in my talking points on like page 4 or something, you're going to see that I guess I wasn't trying to be funny, but if you have a railroad going through your jurisdiction, they have a representative in our organization. If you have a highway, the highway patrols are represented in our organization. You have any public lands, the chief ranger is a member of our association. So if you need any information in any of these areas, anything to do with law enforcement, public safety, chances are very high that the chief of that agency or the sheriff in your county is a member of our organization. Specifically, we have 17 elected Nevada sheriffs and around 40 chiefs of police throughout Nevada, as well as a large number of law enforcement agency executives and leaders from a wide variety of state, local, tribal, and even some federal partners. And like I said, those 150 members supervise 11,000 sworn law enforcement officers. And as a point of clarification, you will have Vegas Metro and Washoe and us, we're representing law enforcement leadership. And then you also have law enforcement union representation. Now we're aligned on a large amount of policy decisions that come from the legislative branch. But some of them we don't always agree on, and any of those that affect our leaders' ability to lead the departments or manage effectively, we might not be aligned. So you've got law enforcement management and you've got law enforcement labor or union. So don't get confused if you think you might have spoken to law enforcement and you've talked to me or Chuck or somebody from Washoe. You might not have spoken to the union on the union bill. So that's the bifurcation there on those two. But generally, we're aligned on the policy issues that you're bringing forth. I don't have to go over the levels of membership. I did want to say, what does all this mean? How can we help? We've had a very cooperative relationship with the legislature for decades, helping to support your good public policy efforts in every way we can. And we are a resource to you to make sure that you can get your questions answered. If you have anything that affects law enforcement, consider the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs as a resource, along with our other legislative partners in law enforcement, to help you get your questions answered. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Spratley. Let me go to my screen here. A couple things I wanted just to mention. Mr. Calloway mentioned this. I did have an opportunity to participate in the Metro Citizens Police Academy back in 2018. I was in Class 1. I would certainly recommend it to members. It is quite a time commitment, but I think whether you're down in Las Vegas or doing the equivalent program up here in Washoe County, I think you'll find it valuable to sort of see the day-to-day operations of the department. And also along with that, if you're in that program, you get to do a ride-along, but of course you don't have to be in the program to do one. I think right now, perhaps they're not doing ride-alongs, but once we get through COVID, I would certainly recommend doing a ride-along with an officer in your jurisdiction. I think it's really eye-opening. And for me personally, I was pretty amazed by the amount of social work we expect our police officers to do when they get involved in domestic disputes and the like. So it would certainly recommend that. I found it to be a valuable experience. That is enough for me. So members, here's sort of the lay of the land. We have about 35 minutes for questions. And at that point, then we'll go to our public comment to close out our meeting. But I'm guessing we're going to have more questions than we have time. But for now, if members, I have a list going already, but if I could maybe have a show of hands, who else has a question for our law enforcement representatives? So if you don't mind just raising your hand on the screen, and I'll go ahead and put you down on the list. Okay. So right now, the order I have at the moment would be Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assemblywoman Cohen, Assemblywoman Hanson, and then we'll take it from there. So Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, you want to kick us off, please?
Thank you so much, Chair Yeager. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentations. We appreciate the information. I have a couple of questions for Officer Calloway. Since I'm down in the South, that's the area that I have the most personal, interest because you're in my jurisdiction. My first question is, you mentioned that there was a training facility that is privately funded. Could you please speak to who is privately funding this this facility, where it is located. You said that many of the other jurisdictions can use it, but why a privately funded facility for public use?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Assemblywoman, that is a great question, ma'am. To build a facility like that is very expensive, and I can get you all the information as far as the cost and the layout and the floor plans and all that. I'd be happy to provide that to you. We actually, it's much more expensive to build a facility like that than what we can allocate in our budget. The city and county fund us, and they just don't have the resources to build a facility like that. And a facility of this nature benefits the entire community. If we can train officers to decrease our use of force and de-escalate and interact with the community in a better way, and we can get state-of-the-art training to our officers, that's vital to our community. And so there's the LVMPD Foundation, which is a private organization that raises money for situations just such as this. And the foundation is actively engaged in seeking private donations from a number of sources. I don't have the list with me today of who's actually donated, but the whole intent is to be able to get this facility and build it, which we would not be able to do otherwise through the regular budget process, if that makes sense, especially in a time where we're seeing COVID impacts on our budgets. Metro had to decrease our proposed budget for the 2021 fiscal year by over $20 million. We had to eliminate part-time positions, eliminate our mounted patrol. So we could not fund a facility like this through the normal budget process. So the foundation is assisting. I hope that answers your question. And I would love to provide, in fact, the entire committee an overview of this project and what it'll ultimately do for our communities.
Mr. Chair, if I may follow up.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, Officer Calloway, for that information. I hope that you can understand the concern that I have that when we have private entities who are financing a training facility, that raises my concern as to whether or not not the training, but the intent is for the benefit of the community or for that private entity that is providing the funding. And so I would really appreciate a list of the donors and what they are contributing, because for the community that I represent, I am concerned personally that we are doing what is right for the citizens, and not necessarily for those who actually can afford to build a multi-million-dollar, tens of million dollars facility. My follow-up question.
Absolutely.
My follow-up question, thank you, to that is body-worn cameras. Now, you mentioned that your officers are wearing them, that you've had 893 complaints, 136 of those you have found to be justified, and that there was some type of remedial either training or discipline given to the officers who were found to have behaved in a not so great behavior with those 136. One of the issues that I'm hearing is that for someone, a citizen, to obtain the film, that there is a months-long process, that it is difficult to get it, the film, that it takes months to get it, and that the cost to obtain
Assemblywoman Armstrong, this is broadcast. It appears that we have lost your sound. If you could go down to the bottom left corner and adjust. Let's try that. Can you say something for us? Nope, it appears your sound is still off. You could go down to the caret on the bottom of the screen and toggle between microphone and same as system. Nope, we are still unable to hear you. 1 second.
Hello?
All right, great. We can hear you now.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. So my concern is multiple, and that is the cost to obtain body-worn camera footage for a civilian, the length of time and the complexity of the process to obtain this film, and who is determining whether or not an incident caught on film is notable enough for there to be a complaint. So if you could please address those three things, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Mr. Chairman, through you to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. So after last legislative session, the legislature passed a public records bill, which was very robust in outlining the process for both civilians and citizens and the media and other entities to get access to public records. As a result of that bill, we established a public records unit at Metro where that's all they do is provide public records to people who request it. The law also that was put into effect by former Majority Leader Senator Ford also provides the ability for someone to come in and view body camera footage on site. So there's actually two processes to potentially get body camera footage. One is to request it through the public records unit, and the second is to actually come in and make an appointment to sit down and view it, where you would sit at a console and you would watch the video. The part of the time-consuming component is the requirement to redact, because, for example, let's say I'm an officer wearing a body camera and I'm inside your home handling a call for service, and the neighbor comes over and I get into some kind of a situation with the neighbor where I have to make an arrest and the neighbor files a complaint. Obviously, the fact that this all started while I was in your living room, you have an expectation of privacy, and there may be parts of that video which need to be redacted to protect crime victims, to protect people's right to privacy, and to protect juveniles, and in some cases, because of the laws that are on the books regarding police officers' Bill of Rights, maybe an officer's face needs to be protected, or a citizen's face needs to be protected. So we have to go through those videos. Basically, the technology that's there is pretty much you have to go through the video frame by frame and redact things that are of a privacy nature. So obviously that's time consuming. Also, we get a ton of requests for video. The primary requests we get for body camera footage, believe it or not, is from lawyers for traffic accidents. So every time that somebody gets in a mild fender bender and the officer shows up with his body camera footage on, the insurance companies, the attorneys that are representing that person request body camera footage to see if they can find anything in the video that might show that either their client was not at fault or whatever. So we get a tremendous amount of requests for body camera footage for simple fender bender accidents. Obviously, I believe that our unit handles these on like a first come, first served basis. So if you were to make a request for body camera footage, you with requests, the redacting that's involved in that, obviously there's a time component. I believe the statute, I can verify this and offline and get back to you, but I believe the statute outlined the costs that the agencies are allowed to charge for public records. I believe that was in the bill from last session, if memory serves me correctly. So I hope that answers your question. Did I miss part of it? If I did, I apologize.
And the length of time. Do you have an average, sir?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but again, I can find it for you. And again, the bill that passed last legislative session, I believe, puts a timeline where the department has to provide the public record within a certain time frame, or there's penalties in the law. I believe there was actually a fine outlined in the bill from last session. But I will find out what our current timeline is, and I will get that information to you.
Thank you, Chair Yeager.
Thank you. And just as a reminder to Mr. Callaway and Mr. Spratley, no need to go through the chair to answer questions unless you just like to do that. But if you could please remember to state your name each time you speak, that'll help our committee secretaries with preparing the minutes. So I have several other people in the queue for questions. We'll go next to Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you so much, Chair. Just for the record, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assembly District 16. I just had a question for Officer Callaway. You mentioned the new policy response to protesters, and I was just curious if you could go into a little bit of detail on like what the policy is or what experiences happened in the last year that triggered the response to change policy.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Chuck Callaway for the record. So as I said in my presentation, I encourage you all to check out this after action report that we did, that's available on lvmpd.com. It actually has a copy of our new policy in it, but I will highlight a couple of points. One of the key areas that was a concern was the way that we were giving a dispersal order. So you have a protest occurring, and as I said, the vast majority of folks there are peaceful, but maybe you have a couple people in the crowd that start throwing rocks or throwing bottles, and the commander at the scene makes a decision that two officers just got hit in the head with rocks. We're going to declare this an unlawful assembly. This is no longer a peaceful protest. It's now become an illegal gathering because violence is occurring. So a dispersal order would be given in the statute, and I apologize because I don't remember the specific NRS off the top of my head, but in the statute, it's very vague on the criteria for a dispersal order. Our agency had a policy, but our policy was also somewhat vague. We would basically read the dispersal order over a bullhorn, which said, this is an unlawful assembly. You must leave the area immediately. If you don't leave the area immediately under NRS, whatever the NRS is, you are subject to arrest for violating the dispersal order. But the problem was, in some cases, people couldn't hear the dispersal order. If you're in the back of the crowd, you couldn't hear it. A specific egress route was not provided. So people said, we were given a dispersal order, but there was no place to go. I couldn't leave. And then the cops came and arrested me, and I couldn't do anything. So obviously those were concerns that we needed to address. So we changed the criteria for given the dispersal order, that it's given from multiple locations, the front of the crowd, the side of the crowd, in an effort so that everyone can hear it. There's also in the policy the requirement that a specific egress route is given and that the protesters are provided with where that egress route is. For example, please move south on Las Vegas Boulevard. And all of these are an effort to try to reduce, number one, people getting arrested for violating the dispersal order when they couldn't get out of the area, or number two, people getting frustrated and upset, and then the whole situation escalates further. So that's one area that we changed in the policy. We also made stricter criteria for deployment of, for example, pepper spray or the pepper rounds, the pepper balls into the crowd. That's in the policy. Restricted, and that would only be an order would be given for that by a commander. It's a pretty lengthy policy, but those are some of the highlights. Another component is that the requirement to reach out to the organizers of the protests and try to create a dialogue with them ahead of time, so that everyone's on the same page. We were over the previous years. It's apples and oranges, but we were very successful with protests such as the Culinary Union, where we would meet with Culinary Union leaders and they would tell us what they plan on doing. You know, hey, we're going to take over the roadway, or we're going to lock arms and not leave. And then we would tell them what would happen from our side, and we'd all get on the same page and things go smooth and there's less chance of violence. And the policy encourages that same communication with leaders who are putting together protests or putting together marches. The problem we run into sometimes is either A, people don't want to communicate with us because they don't trust us, or B, it's hard to identify who is actually the person that's in charge or the informal leader who's putting the group together. So those are sometimes challenges, but those are just a few key areas. Again, I'd be happy to provide the entire policy to the committee so you have it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Callaway. I actually do have a follow-up question as well. Again, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assembly District 16 for the record. Are you all tracking protesters? And if you are, what constitutes you, or like what triggers a tracking of a protester?
We don't track specific protesters. We track protest events. So, and obviously there's an intelligence component to this that obviously, I can't get into too much detail about the intelligence side of it, but we do monitor what events, for example, on social media are being put out there that, hey, tomorrow night, everyone meet here. Sometimes they're just straightforward, peaceful protests. And then, another thing that I forgot to mention is, one of the lessons we learned is that the worst thing you can do at a protest is, especially when it's a protest. So, for example, you have the culinary union. Obviously, they're not protesting because they're angry at the police. They're protesting because the employers aren't providing, the right benefits to the members. But in the case of many of the protests we saw this last year, the people are angry at us and they don't like the police and they think that we're engaged in wrongful activity and they don't trust us and they're mad and they want justice and rightfully so. But then you're sending the very people out there to try to maintain calm and order that are the people they're mad at. And obviously it's a recipe for disaster. So the worst thing you can do is go set up a skirmish line of officers in front of protesters. We've learned from our mistakes, and in most cases, unless criminal activity starts to occur, we keep our officers out of sight. We monitor the march, we monitor the protest, and our goal is also to make sure the protesters are safe. Because as we've seen in protests, you might remember from the news early on last year, we stopped a car that had some individuals that I don't remember their specific affiliation, Boogaloos or something, but they had explosive devices in the car and they had weapons in the vehicle. And obviously they were on their way to the protest to try to cause harm, and innocent people that were there exercising their First Amendment rights could be caught up in that. So our goal is to protect the public, to protect the protesters, and to protect property, especially when we get to the Strip where it's the lifeblood of our, any property we want to protect. But we're in a pandemic where the economy is suffering and, people, violent crime on the uptick. And then if we had, the Strip set on fire and burning, obviously that's something we might not ever recover from as a state. And everything we've talked about today, whether it's mental health resources, whether it's our schools, are impacted by that. So it's something that's very important. And I'm sorry, I'm starting to ramble beyond the question, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. I'm reshuffling a little bit here. I want to make sure we get as many questions as we can. So we're going to go next to Assemblywoman Hanson and then Assemblyman Wheeler. So go ahead, Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. And hello, Mr. Callaway and Mr. Spratley. This is a real quick one. Mr. Callaway, on your presentation, on slide 35, which is the one that said major challenges facing law enforcement, I'm assuming those are the national statistics. I was just a little confused because then slide 36 went to the protests and civil disorder, the 318 protests since May 2020. That's the state, that's the Las Vegas Metro slide, correct?
Yes, Assemblywoman Chuck Callaway again for the record. Assemblywoman Hanson, yes, you're absolutely correct. Major challenges facing law enforcement, that's national. The slide on protest was specific to our jurisdiction only.
Okay, thank you. And I think Chair Yeager, I get an award for being short for once.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I appreciate that. We'll go next to Assembly.
A donut will do.
A donut will always do. We'll go next to Assemblyman Wheeler.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not allowed to have donuts, so you're going to have to buy me a drink when this one's nice and short. But I have a question for Mr. Spratley, please. This is Assemblyman Wheeler, District 39 for the record. I know, and Mr. Callaway said that recruitment problems right now due to negative press and just kind of an attitude out there is really affecting some of the larger departments. And I'm wondering, in the rural areas, how much has recruitment been effective, and what is your plan, if so, to try to make that better?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Wheeler. Eric Spratley for the record for the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs. Just like any other law enforcement agency, actually, it seems like in the nation, our rural agencies are hit specifically hard by the inability to recruit. And so we've offered up our Sheriffs and Chiefs website. We've got a whole network of ways that we're trying to help our rural agencies recruit law enforcement officers. And last year really, it seemed like at the beginning of the pandemic, we were, first responders and everybody was in our corner. And then, the tragic events of some criminal officers elsewhere affected law enforcement nationwide. And it really did affect our ability to recruit qualified people. They're just choosing to go into different businesses and giving up their criminal justice degree. And, it just doesn't seem like it's worth it. So we want to make sure as y'all are putting together some good public policy on police reform, like Chuck said, this business is always in a position of reforming. We get a guy that does something wrong or a policy that doesn't work or new technology, and our agencies take a step back. That's why this association exists. They share ideas and they come up with an idea to reform what didn't work or what will work better, and all to make sure that our officers that will decide to join our law enforcement agencies will go home safe at night. So that's why we're a partner with you to make sure that you guys get some great public policy that we can implement on the executive branch, and then we'll continue to reach out and try to attract folks to all of our law enforcement agencies, including the rurals.
Thank you, Mr. Spratley. Mr. Chairman, just one quick follow-up, if you don't mind.
Just go ahead.
Really quick. What I'm getting at, Mr. Spratley and Mr. Callaway, is I know that in the past, sometimes we have lowered some standards in order to recruit more people. And I don't want to see that happen again. That usually leads to something that doesn't work out very well. So you just don't have any plans, as far as I know, or as far as you know, I should say, to lower standards to bring more people in.
Thank you for that clarification, Assemblyman Wheeler. Eric Spratley, Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs for the record. No plans to lower standards. And one of the other things we want to watch for, folks, is taking away the ability for cops in Nevada to be able to do their job and survive doing the job. Now, if we have bad apples, we want them out. If we have a cop that does something illegal, we want them out. But if you take away qualified immunity, it's going to be something that's talked about, I'm sure. The officer that does something in error, but not intentionally, then can lose his livelihood, his house, over a something minor that he gets sued for personally. And so I don't think cops should have this coverage of immunity for all their actions. That's not what I'm getting at. We certainly don't want that to happen, but we need to make sure that officers that committed an error aren't, destroyed because of it, right? So hope that answers the question.
Hey, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And obviously, Mr. Spratley, I don't know what's going to be in front of the committee, but if and when we have any issues relating to qualified immunity, we'll of course hear testimony on those bills and hear a lot of different perspectives before we would think about processing it. So remains to be determined what might show up in committee. As you all know, they're still hard at work drafting all of these bills, and I think we should see some more bills in the near future here. We have a little bit of time left still, and I'm going to go to Assemblyman O'Neill, although I'm going to mention that Assemblyman O'Neill mentioned a couple different questions in the chat, one including the proposed state laboratory. But Assemblyman O'Neill, I would ask you to hold that question because I don't think we're going to be debating that policy this session. So I'd ask you to take that one offline. But if you want to ask, I believe it was Mr. Callaway, your second question you had about CARES funding, please go ahead.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. To Mr. Callaway, I heard some rumors or people have said things to me about how Metro may have misused their CARE funding. Can you explain to me how Metro did address their CARE funding and what utilized it for, please?
Yes, sir. Chuck Callaway for the record, to Assemblyman O'Neill. So first of all, Metro did not receive any direct CARE funding. CARE funding came to the city and the county, I believe. And obviously those entities fund us. My understanding is that we received some funding to reimburse us for PPE equipment that was purchased. And there was also some funding to pay for a special investigative unit to do enforcement of certain businesses that were not complying with the governor's restrictions. Other than that, I'm not aware of any CARES funding that our agency received.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. We'll go next to, I think, Assemblywoman Hardy. Did you have a question as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's good to see both of you here today speaking on law enforcement. I just had a question for Mr. Callaway. You said there are about 3,300 officers currently serving about 2 million residents. Are you currently recruiting? Do you have money in the budget for more hires? And is there, just for my own information, is there like an optimal amount of officers per population? So if you could answer those questions.
Sure. Thank you. Chuck Callaway again for the record, to Assemblywoman Hardy. So to answer your last question first, the optimal number for officers per citizen ratio is 2 officers per 1,000 citizen. That's considered national best practices for jurisdictions. Metro has lagged below that for years. As a result of the More Cops sales and use tax, which was implemented years ago, and then also enabled for the County Commission back in 2013, and also the Crime Prevention Act, which was done in a special session along with the Raiders Stadium. Those 2 avenues have helped us reach the 2.0 officers per 1,000 ratio. We finally got there before the pandemic. We had several academies. I believe we hired close to 900 officers with that revenue, which got us to the 2 officers per 1,000. Prior to the pandemic, everything was going good. We had academies scheduled. Once the pandemic hit, we realized that funding was going to be an issue. The sheriff did not want to cancel a couple of academies that we had slated that had already been funded, because we knew down the road we were going to see a potential decrease in officers. So we wanted to get those officers through an academy and out on the street because those academies were already funded. So we did have several academies during the summer during the pandemic. But in December, I believe we instituted a hiring freeze. And then, like I said, unfortunately, we had to cut $20 million from our proposed budget. We had to let go part-time employees. We're starting to eliminate positions at this time, primarily civilian positions, where if someone retires or someone leaves, we're just not going to fill those positions currently until revenue starts to come back to support them. In some cases, we may eliminate commission positions. If, for example, I said we disbanded the mounted unit. So in a long-winded way to answer your question, we're currently okay. I don't believe that we're going to be running any immediate academies that I'm aware of right now. But hopefully our revenue will improve and we'll be able to get back and maintain that 2.0 per 1,000 ratio.
Thank you.
Director Callaway, I had a couple members ask me a clarifying question, and I wasn't sure, so I'm going to ask you. In one of your slides, or one of the presentation points, you had mentioned arrests for misdemeanors and needing to get some kind of approval. And I think the clarifying question was just on DUIs and domestic violence cases, when the arrest happens, as the crime is happening or right afterwards, is there still in statute, you still a mandatory arrest, or can you just kind of clarify maybe what you meant by getting permission or approval on the misdemeanors?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Chuck Callaway again for the record. Domestic violence, DUI, there seems like there's another mandatory one out there, but for some reason my brain's blank. Those are mandatory arrests per state law. So the officer has zero discretion. You stop a DUI driver, he goes to jail. You stop someone who beat their wife, they go to jail. The misdemeanors I was talking about was, for example, your shoplifting, your trespass, your disturbing the peace, your maybe even a battery. Two guys get in a fist fight in a bar, and neither of them are hurt very bad, and they both shake hands afterwards, but somebody wants to press charges, maybe they get a ticket, nobody gets arrested. So if an officer did decide that for whatever reason they needed to make an arrest, for just an example, let's say a person has been trespassed from a property 6 times and they're back again, and the officer says, I'm going to give you a ticket for trespassing, and the person says, well, I'm not leaving, I'm going to stay here, I'm not going anywhere, I don't care how many tickets you give me. The officer says, okay, well, I'm probably going to need to make an arrest because a ticket is not going to solve this problem. They contact a supervisor, and then the supervisor would determine, yes, an arrest is warranted, or no, an arrest will not be made. We're not going to put this person in the detention center for a trespass. Figure out another way to handle it. So that's what I was talking about. But we're absolutely going to make an arrest on mandatory arrest crimes.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Callaway. And committee, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, I know there were some additional questions. I would encourage you to reach out offline, and I can assure you that both Director Callaway and Director Spratley will be common participants in the Judiciary Committee hearings as we start hearing policy bills. So please don't think this is the last opportunity you're going to have to talk to them and ask questions. And Director Callaway, Director Spratley, want to thank you for spending part of your Monday morning with us and for sharing information and answering questions. And we certainly look forward to working with you the rest of the session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with you in the committee. I'm here for all of you. Just holler at me with anything you might have. And I'll get those questions that were asked. I'll send those answers to the committee secretary so you all have them.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And have a great rest of the day. Okay, committee, thank you for that. I know it's a lot of information to absorb on a Monday morning. And so at this time, we'll close out the presentations, and we're going to go to our public comment line. As a reminder, we will take up to 30 minutes of public comment. Each speaker on the line will have 2 minutes to provide the public comment. I'm getting my handy timer set up here, and broadcast services, if you could let us know if there's anyone in the public comment line, and if so, if you could queue up the first caller, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. And we will begin with the first caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 190. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, my name is Erica Minaberry. That's ErikaMinaberry for the record. And I am here testifying as a social worker and a low-income single mother. I first would like to say that you guys have spent a lot of time receiving information about how excellent the police force is doing. I do hope that the equal amount of time is being spent on those that think differently, so you have a full spectrum of what is actually happening with the police force in our state. I noticed that several people had mentioned how much social work that the police officers are doing. me as a social worker, I had to spend 4 years in school to learn everything that I know about social work. And I know that the police force doesn't receive that kind of training. I would strongly suggest that perhaps funding social work programs and diverting those funds away from the police force would be one way to make this society a little bit more equitable to those people that aren't on the police force and yet are still voters in Nevada. One of the reasons why the police force might be having recruitment problems is because of the racial disparities about why there are so many more black people and brown people that are incarcerated over white people, and not a lot of people want to take part in that system. So perhaps if those issues were addressed, the recruitment wouldn't be such a big issue. Lastly, I would like to say that for police to assume that they have qualified immunity for errors that equally destroy people's lives, it is a bit unfair to think that police are immune from making mistakes. If I make a mistake at my job, I risk being fired. There's no reason why police should feel that they have job security when they're not doing a good job. And personally, I got a speeding ticket on March 17th. That has turned into a warrant because I couldn't pay it, and my license has been suspended. I feel I should get qualified immunity because I made an error by going 5 miles over the speed limit, and yet my whole life is being destroyed because of that one mistake that I made on March 17th, the same day that the courts were closed down last year. That's all. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Hey, thank you so much for your public comment, Ms. Minberry. We appreciate it. BPS, do we have another caller on the line?
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no further callers at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. I will close public comment then. And before we get to announcements and next steps, anything else from committee members this morning? I think I have you all on my screen finally. Okay, I don't see anything. So I want to thank you all. I know Monday morning, 8 o'clock starts can be a little difficult, especially coming off of Super Bowl Sunday. But as you can see, we started at 8 because I suspected the presentations would take a little bit of time today and we would have questions. And of course, that's how it played out. So thank you again for all being here and engaged. In terms of the rest of this week, I think the agendas are out, if not for the whole week, then almost for the whole week. But tomorrow we'll have a couple presentations. We'll hear that Gaming Control Board presentation that we were going to hear on Thursday, but had to be rescheduled. And then we're going to hear from the district attorney's offices, both in Clark County and up here in Washoe County. Fast forwarding to Wednesday, we're going to hear presentations from our two public defender offices in Clark and Washoe, as well as from the Supreme Court of Nevada. And we're going to hear our first bill, or at least endeavor to, on Wednesday as well. That would be Assembly Bill 17 that was referenced in our presentation with parole and probation. So please be sure to review that and be ready to ask questions if you have any on Wednesday. Good news on Thursday is we'll be a 9 o'clock start on Thursday instead of an 8 o'clock start. So you can put that down in your calendar. We'll hear a presentation on juvenile justice, the juvenile justice system, victim services, and we're also going to hear a bill that day. And then Friday, we're looking at potentially a presentation and a couple of bills as well. So things are going to start ramping up pretty quickly. Most of you should be getting your bills from LCB. So I suspect our workload is going to increase in the Judiciary Committee, and we just ask everyone to make sure to try to stay on top of these bills as much as you can, and feel free to ask questions of myself or the Vice Chair as always. So I think that's everything for today. Again, want to thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. I want to remind members that floor today, I believe, starts at noon. Make sure you are down there at noon, as I believe we'll be swearing in our newest member of the Assembly. So we want to try to get started on time. So everyone have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.
Bye, everyone.